IB Nation, what's going on? Welcome to the Irish Breakdown Podcast, coming to you live on a Friday, which means it's Friday Free For All Mailbag. I'm Ryan Roberts, Director of Recruiting here at Irish Breakdown, joined by my man, Mr. Brian Driscoll, the publisher, owner, operator, everything else in between.
You can just say Brian Driscoll. It's all good. I appreciate that.
I did give you that long title, man. Like, you ever seen Game of Thrones where they have to give like 17 titles before people's names?
I never watched much of Game of Thrones.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I watched a little bit of the first season and it just was like, yeah, this is a hard pass.
Dude, Daenerys Targaryen, she had like 17 nicknames before finally saying Daenerys Targaryen. So that's kind of where I was going for there. But we're live here on a Friday, like I said, Brian. So we have a lot of mailbag questions that are already in the chat. We had 45 before we even started the show. So a lot of questions.
Love it.
Today, of course, was the pro day at Notre Dame, which Brian was at for a while. I think Sean Davis is still at the pro day as we speak right now. So we're not going
to early so I could be with y'all.
Yes.
That's what I did today.
Yeah, you want to talk about commitment. That is commitment right there. So if you all want a little bit more of an in-depth conversation about the pro day, we'll probably do more of that tomorrow after the open practice and kind of talk it out of what we saw in the open practice, what Brian and Sean saw live at the pro day. But there are plenty of pro day questions that are already in the chat, so we'll be able to knock through a bunch of those. So that all to be said is that we're not going to have like an in-depth conversation about the pro day here. We're more going to answer some questions about the pro day. And like I said, open practice tomorrow. So there's going to be a lot of content in Irish Breakdown. So make sure to go sign up boards at irishbreakdown.com. Intel pieces, both from the team side, recruiting side. A lot of content coming out. So make sure to tap in. But Brian, Friday, we know what that means.
Yeah,
the community, the Irish Breakdown community gets to lead the conversation today, which is a great opportunity for everyone.
Our version of Open Line Friday. So that's what I'm fired up about. So yeah, let's dive right into it, man. And of course, John A1 has a bunch of them, so we'll try to mix others into them. Him and Michael Collins come correct early on, man. I absolutely love it. So we'll start here with him.
And John's first question, it's a two-parter. It says, in modern football, where the passing game dominates, why does the shelf life for running backs seem to be shorter? Looking back to the past running backs where franchise players averaged nearly 30 carries, was it the Terrell Davis injuries that began to change the tide? Is it salary cap investment for a position that's less valuable in modern football, or is it something else? I think it's a fascinating question, Brian. I would say, John, I think usually it's a little bit of everything, right? But I think that you hit on something there, John, is that for the investment part of it, I think that teams are just less likely to give running backs bigger second contracts, which means some guys start to fall through the cracks a little bit. You know, it's become a young man's game at the running back position. So I still do think that there's some running backs that are like, for instance, maybe like 28 years old that maybe just don't get as many opportunities because they kind of have hit that age where teams think that they have kind of depreciated as far as their value. So I think that's part of it. And then also, you know, it's the wear and tear still. I mean, these guys have been running the football a ton, most likely since they were in high school, when they're in college, in the NFL. There is definitely a attrition aspect to it, but I think you hit on something key there, Brian, in my opinion, that it's like if a running back's 28, maybe I overlook him to get the younger guy in the building. So maybe he could actually play for a year or two more, but maybe I just look for a guy that maybe has a little bit more value to me in the sense that he's a younger commodity, if that makes sense.
I think that's part of it. I think there's other parts of it too, is the game has become so specialized at running back that traditional running backs just kind of get used up early. And then when they've, get to their second contract, or like Ezekiel Elliott, I mean, he's not that old. And the guy was playing college football in 2015, right? And the Cowboys have already moved on from him.
I think he's only like 28 or something, man. 27. Like he's still young.
He's 27. He'll be 28 before the season starts, and the Cowboys are ready to move on from him. And why? Because he's not as good as he was when he was younger. And there's all types of reasons why. And obviously some of those are Ezekiel Elliott's fault, right? But I think that's part of. I think what you said is part of it, Ryan. I think that another big part of it too is, I think the financial part and all that you mentioned, but here's another part for me is that running back is still one of those positions with the way the game is played today. There's not the value of a 4.2 yard per carry Jerome Bettis type of back. And I mean, we're seeing that with Tennessee and talking about already moving on from Derrick Henry because they don't want to pay him that money. I mean, he's 29 years old. You'd think the guy was like going on 40. The way that they're acting, you know what I mean? And even though the fact that he's coming off of a year in the NFL where he was a 1,000-yard rusher, and the year before that he was a guy that had 937 yards rushing and 10 touchdowns in only 8 games.
Right.
On pace for almost 20 touchdowns 2 years ago. So then they're ready to move on from him. Why? Because he's 29 and makes a lot of money. They just don't want to pay that position. But there's another part of it too, to me, Ryan, that running backs, in the way the game is played today, the fact that they wear down quicker makes them less valuable earlier in their career. And I think there's another position we kind of see this with, Ryan, and that's linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're not seeing as many 35, 36-year-old linebackers as we used to either, because they lose a step. And the way the game is played to now, because it's such a sideline to sideline game now, and pass coverage is so important, that 34-year-old thumper Mike linebacker that doesn't run like he used to, but can still hit and read a defense and all that and play in the box. Well, this isn't a box game anymore. And so that guy is not there anymore. We're not going to see the Jerome Bettises anymore. We're not going to see the Mike Singletaries anymore, and those guys that are a lot older doing that. So I think that's all part of it, where the game is played, where, you know, a wide receiver can lose a step and still be really good because he's crafty. He can run routes.
Right.
There's no craftiness about being a running back unless you're Barry Sanders. I mean, you lose a step, you lose a step.
Yep.
Emmitt Smith would have never been allowed to play as long as he did in today's era.
Okay.
I think that's a good thing. And honestly, Ryan, that's part of the reason I don't like watching the NFL anymore, to be honest with you, is because of that. So I think that factors in as on top of the things that you mentioned, Ryan. So I'm not saying it's different than the ones you said. It's just on a little piece of that as well.
Well, I think all those reasons add up, right? Like, I've always been on the vantage point that most things don't have one right answer, right? There's a contributing factors from a lot of different areas. The linebacker note's really interesting too, Brian, because you're not wrong, man. Like, there is a lot less, because you know why it is, and I always push back on this term. People say like 2 down run stoppers at linebacker. That's not a thing anymore, man. They're 1 down players at this point at Mike linebacker. Like, they really are, as much as I hate it, because like I was more of a box player, you know, like I could go out in space a little bit when I played, but like I was more of like tackle to tackle type of player, you know what I mean? And linebacker position has been depreciated. It's absolutely, right. I mean, that's why you always hear people.
Of player at linebacker has, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bummer, but I mean, that's just kind of the way it's going, man. It's just the way that it's going. And again, I think it'll cycle back at some point in time, but it's not going to be the next 2-3 seasons, in my opinion.
Exactly. From Michael Collins, he says, do you have any concerns that Ron Paulus III being medically retired will negatively impact his dad's relationship with Coach Freeman and or the program?
I honestly don't have any idea. I don't see why. I mean, look, his son's going to still be on scholarship. His son's still going to get a chance to graduate from the University of Notre Dame. I mean, I would hope that he had no illusions that his son was a Division I quarterback. I don't know that he did or didn't. I mean,
yeah,
like here's the thing about it. I don't think this is a thing where Marcus Freeman walked in there and told a completely healthy, never been injured Ron Paulus III, sorry, dude, you're out of here. I don't think that was part of the conversation at all. Ron Paulus III has been injured a lot during his career. He has had issues. There's been times, Ryan, where we've been at practice and in the past, or you guys were there, and he wasn't out there. We've seen pictures of them after games where he's in street clothes. You know, so he has had a lot of injuries. I think this is a legitimate thing. So I don't think that would create any problems. And look, I'm not someone who shies away from being critical of his dad. I have no problem doing that. I don't think this is one of those things where there's any kind of issue. And if it does create an issue, then that speaks volumes about Ron Paulus's dad. I was
going to say, that's like, if there was a major issue there, man, that's like some helicopter parent stuff, right? Like that's what that is, you know? Right. So
yeah, it would be really not good. Really not good.
From Coach Bent 574, if Notre Dame was playing competitive inter-squad scrimmage tomorrow, what is their most versatile defensive 11? Obviously, no sub packages allowed on defense.
Well, let's answer that, Ryan, and assume that everyone is healthy. Okay,
sure.
So let's assume that Cam Hart can go in a full squad scrimmage, and let's assume Thomas Harper could as well, which they can't.
Okay. Yeah.
To me, it would be, as far as like, they can't sub package, so I've got to go with something that can be a base first down defense. I'd have Jordan Patelho at the Viper. I'd have Javonte Jean-Baptiste at the big end position. I guess they're calling it field end now. I'd have Riley Mills at 3 technique and Howard Cross at nose. That's easy for my interior of my offensive line. My starting linebackers would be, I'd probably, if again, we're talking sub package, I'm going to give you 2 answers because the answers are going to change if we're playing a more of a pro style. Oh, I guess facing Notre Dame's team, I'm going to go this way, actually, Ryan. I'm actually going to go with the base defense because if we're talking about Notre Dame, they're going to do a lot of 12 personnel, things like that. So you got to be prepared for that. So I'm going to go Jalen Sneed at Rover. I'm going to go with J.D. Bertrand at Mike. And I'm going to go with either, okay, I can't sub-package, but I can rotate. I'm going to go with a combination of Nolan Ziegler and Jack Kaiser at will. And I don't care who starts. I'm going to go with those 2 guys at will. My corners are easy. I'm going to go with Benjamin Morrison and Cam Hart, and my safeties are Ramon Henderson and Xavier Watts. I think that gives me a really athletic, versatile group. You've got a guy like Jalen Sneed who can run, who can cover, who can blitz. He can do a lot of different things. My will is going to be a more effective pass game guy this year. I think Jack Kaiser's limitations at Rover are somewhat minimized at will. There's still limitations with a will who's short, Ryan. We saw these with J.D. Bertrand at times 2 years ago, but I think the safety play is better and the corner play and the boundary is better that now that you can kind of help ease some of those things. But that's why I have Nolan Ziegler in there. So if I'm facing a team that likes to run a lot of boundary stuff with their wide receivers or, work a lot of back hash stuff where your backside will's got to get up underneath that stuff, then I'll put Nolan Ziegler in there. So that's my so I'm going to cheat a little bit and do that, Ryan. But that would be my answer. I mean, you could go Thomas Harper at nickel. And I think you could handle run game stuff to a degree. But if I'm playing like a pro-style running team, I don't have the great – I could handle the pass better with Jalen Sneed at Rover than I can handle a run with Thomas Harper at Rover if I'm playing a team that's running their base defense, their base offense.
Sure. I would say this. I think that I don't really have too many changes that I would make off of the lineup that you put, Brian. I think the great thing about – having Jordan Botelho and Joshua Burnham, though, as the Viper in this scenario is that, and I think someone just asked about it in the chat, which I think is a very applicable thing, because you're asking about versatility here, right? So when I think of versatility, that means that you can do multiple things out of it, right? So if I have Jordan Botelho, if I say I'm going to go into a 3-3 look, I can just stack Jordan Botelho as a Sam linebacker. So you still have that 3-3 fronts. You would still have Riley Mills and Javonte Jean-Baptiste, as your defensive ends, and then you would still have a guy like a Howard Cross. And then the great thing is that you could potentially just cycle out. You could take Jalen Sneed off the field, for instance, and you could put Thomas Harper on the field, right? Where you're just like, that kid is a nickel who could also probably play a little bit of safety. So that also brings versatility to it.
Right.
So I think that's
the only reason I didn't go with him is because he said no sub packages.
Yeah.
Right. That's because if we can do sub packages, then I'm absolutely doing that. No question.
I think that lineup makes the most sense again because it's like you 4-2-5 base, but you could also run a 3-3-5 base out of that as well. It would just, Jalen Sneed would be more of a nickel than a true linebacker spot, like a Sam linebacker. Sure. Jordan Botelho would now become your Sam linebacker, to your point.
Right. Yeah, that'd be an interesting alignment for sure. No doubt about that. No doubt about that. All right, here we go. Let's get to this next one, Ryan.
From Paul Hamilton, who said, can we get a Nolan Ziegler update? I feel like I do not hear about him a lot.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much you want us to talk about Nolan Ziegler. I feel like we talk about him all the time.
On this show.
Every time we ever talk about linebackers, we talk about Nolan Ziegler. So I'm not sure what else we can do. As far as update, he's on the team and he's gone through the first 2 practices. Again, we were there for the first 5 periods, and I don't know exactly what we saw. No team, we saw no one-on-ones. We saw the linebackers going through drills. Right. He's a scholarship player at Notre Dame. If he doesn't look good going through those drills, then he shouldn't be on scholarship at Notre Dame. So, I mean, we did a breakout show last week, Ryan, and he was my pick for breakout player at linebacker. So, I'm not sure, Paul, what else you want me to talk about with him. I mean,
and if you're asking for
we've seen 25 minutes of one practice.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say, like, Paul, if you wanted a more in-depth, just evaluation of Nolan and how he's doing, that's like an end of the spring type of thing, right? Like that's way more important at this point. Yeah.
And I'll talk about him tomorrow because as I said the other day, I'm going to focus more on the defense tomorrow
Right.
Whereas in practice number 1, I tried to focus more on the offense because, I want to, when it's so like in the past, Ryan, when we get full practices, I'll talk about the whole team.
Right.
Because there's just different periods of time when I can look at different parts of it and say, hey, here's what I think about this group. Here's what I think about that group. Here's how this group performed here. Because during a full 2-hour practice, I can spend different times watching different groups and feel good about what I did. But when you're talking about a 25-minute practice, if I was going to watch the whole group by myself, I'd get a little bit of everybody, and that wouldn't give you much. So I focus on one side of the ball when we do those type of things. So I'll have more on the defense on Saturday. And by then, Paul, hopefully we do have an update on how Nolan did.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would much rather hyper focus on a few players than just get a little tiny bit about a bunch of guys, right? Like, I mean, because that's what we strive for here, right? Like we want in-depth analysis. We don't want just like shallow analysis. So I think that's the way to do it.
Sorry. I was like I was feeling like my neck was feeling a little weird. I'm like, why do I feel like there's this weird rubbing? And I forgot that I took my
your media pass,
press credential pass. Yeah. So from Pro Day. So my bet on that. I was like, what the heck is scratching my neck? Whoops.
That's
whoops,
funny.
Whoops. Here we go. Let's go. Let's move on.
From Nathan Milton, he said, of all the recruits going back to 2000, which ones were you most wrong about?
What's the kid's? Josh Barajas.
Yeah, you thought he was going to be a stud, right?
I did. I love that kid coming out of high school.
I love Max Redfields. I love Max.
I think Max was a good player, though. I mean, Max was a multi-year starter at Notre Dame. I mean, he was not a bad football player.
I just thought he was going to be
2.5 seasons.
I thought he was going to be a superstar, man. I thought he was going to be a superstar.
It's one thing. So you're telling me the worst prediction you've made is a guy that you thought was going to be a superstar, but he was only a 2.5-year starter? That's your worst one?
I feel like that's a miss, man.
Right on everyone else. Okay.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying I think it's a miss on my part. I think it was a miss. I think it was a little bit of a miss.
Which is really the most wrong about? I picked a guy that I thought was going to be a stud at Notre Dame, and he couldn't even start at a 1AA school.
That's wild. Yeah.
Now, this is the thing is when the guys like that bust out, it's not like I was wrong and he wasn't athletic. I mean, he showed up at Notre Dame really overweight, had work ethic issues. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that stuff other than just, oh, gee, I thought he was good and he really wasn't that good. But yeah, he was without question my biggest one.
I think we talked about him the other day. Darnell Ewell.
Yes.
Is one for me. Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. Where I missed with Ewell was the floor. Because he's one of those guys that graded as a 4-star with a 4-star ceiling. Like, I just thought he was going to be what he was when he showed up, but he wasn't even he couldn't even do that. And he had a really tough time adjusting to Notre Dame. That was another thing that he struggled with.
Man, he looked like $1 million in high school, man. I was like, that kid's going to be good, man. He's going to be good.
Yeah. I was shocked he wasn't better than he was. And my dad's like 6'2 and a half, 6'3. Like, he's a big guy. And he actually went and covered Darnell's commitment because at the time, my parents lived like 10, 15 minutes away. My dad actually went to Lake Taylor High School as a kid. I can't remember if he was bused to Lake Taylor or bust to Booker T, but they started doing the busing, the with segregation and all that ending, they started doing busing. And so they started busing the poor kids to certain schools, and my dad got bused to the poor kids school. And I just don't remember if that was to Lake Taylor or to Booker T before he dropped out. So I can't remember, but he went to Lake Taylor and that's where Darnell went. So we didn't live that far from Lake Taylor. Actually, I played against Lake Taylor in high school. My freshman year at Kempsville, we played against Lake Taylor as our non-conference game. So so he went and covered it, and he was like, man, that's a big human being. And again, my dad's not small, Ryan. He's a pretty big guy. So I was like, okay, yeah, that tells me a little something. Actually, you met my dad.
I did meet your dad.
Yeah,
once.
He's a big fella.
He is a big guy. Yeah. Oh man, Darnell. I just remember, man, like he had such a clean frame in high school too, right? Like he was just massive. He was just massive kid.
Just no feel for the game whatsoever is what they kept saying. And he had a tough time adjusting. So, those are good ones. Yeah.
And from John A1, another question: is Tyson Ford more of an inside-outside player, similar to track to Riley Mills has gone through at Notre Dame, or will he just move inside at 292 pounds? If he is pure inside player, how does that affect big end recruiting numbers going forward?
Well, I think he's an inside-out guy, but inside out meaning 3 technique and 4 down. 5 technique and 4 or 4 eye and 3 down is what I think.
So similar to what you see with Riley Mills.
Very similar to what I see from Riley Mills.
Sure.
I think that Tyson probably has a little bit more ability based on high school film to be a pure edge guy than Riley had, but I don't know how he's going to move at 292. I have to see that. Hopefully I'll see that tomorrow as well. But I think they already kind of have started to project him inside with their recruiting, because they signed 3 guys that are going to start off at big end in the 2023 class, and Brendan Vernon, Boubacar Traore, and Armel Mukam. I expect one of those guys to move inside, but those are 3 guys that I anticipate, Ryan, starting their career at the field end, big end position. So I think they've already kind of projected to have him be more of an inside guy, to be completely honest with you. And then the other thing too is, if you're in some looks, if you are going to do, and we'll have a question about the 3-3-5 coming up, but in some looks, if you're going to a pure 3-3-5, you can, like TCU has basically 2, I mean, their 2 ends are basically big, would be 3 techniques and a 4 down. More, you know what I mean? Like, that's what teams that do that as their base will do a lot. If Notre Dame is definitely going to a package where, hey, we're going to be primarily 3-3 this series, then they can put 2 of those guys on the field together.
Yes.
In those situations. And, and then with a guy like Tyson Ford, the value that he brings is, Ryan, is he could play the end spot, but then if you did want to slide to a 4 down, he can just kick inside in a 4-eye or 3 technique and still be effective.
Brian, can I say that I was, and again, this isn't practical as much because I haven't seen that what it looks like in practice, but I was really happy about some of the weight gains for the interior defensive linemen on paper.
Dude, they got big.
Yeah.
A bunch of 290, 300-plus pound dudes,
Gabriel Rubio's over 300 pounds. Aiden Keanu kind of dropped a little bit of weight, which I think was super interesting. Tyson Ford's over 290. Jason Onye was like 288 or something like that? Like, he was somewhere in that ballpark. Riley Mills is up to 296. On paper, I'm like, okay, pretty soon you're not going to be able to say that Notre Dame has no size on the interior. You're like, there's some size coming, man, which was nice to see. Really nice to see.
Yeah, we'll and I think Boubacar could be like that too moving forward, Ryan, as well. I think I could see him being a 280 pound guy that can play big end and slide inside and handle it there as well. So they got bigger with their did they recruit any pure 300 pounders in their 2023 class? No. But they got bigger. They got longer and taller and thicker than what they had been, in my opinion.
I know Devin Houston's out for the spring, Brian, but he got up to 287 pounds too, right? Like, he's a big cat as well. I mean, you got some guy. He's going to be 295, 300 pounds before too long. Like, that's easy. Brendan Vernon's the interesting one for me, Brian. Like, he was up to 280 something pounds during the season. He got that down to 259 for the All-American Bowl in San Antonio. I'm really interested to see how they project Brendan Vernon long term, as far as, is he a guy that you're going to pack weight on? Is he a guy that you're just going to leave as the big end? Really interested to see how Brendan Vernon slots in.
Yeah. It's going to be, very interesting to see how those guys pan out. There's no doubt about that. Here we go.
Next question for Michael Collins. Do recruits ever mention positive interactions with fans to you? What suggestions do you have for us to make a positive impact outside of the obvious, don't sell tickets, no negative social media, etc.? I mean, to me, Brian, all the time, I've talked to a lot of recruits that when they get on campus, they talk about like the game day atmosphere, for instance. And they talk about it all the time, about how welcoming fans are, how it was awesome just to be able to talk to them. Their parents get an opportunity to chit chat with Notre Dame fans. So I mean, I've heard a lot about positive interactions.
And they love it when when you know who they are.
Yes.
Like, hey, so-and-so, you're the man, something like that. I think, cheer for them. Be encouraging to them. Like you said, no negative. Look, honestly, if there was no social media, the reality is the view of the fan player relationship would be much different than it is today.
Yeah.
And you'd have those crazies that will send in letters, but it was easy to, ignore those. You didn't have to read those. But, to me, I think that's kind of where I see it, Ryan, is just, when you see them on campus, be encouraging. If they're if they're Notre Dame commits or Notre Dame players, and they have some sort of NIL thing that you can support it if you're able to. Like people that bought some of Foskey's gear or something like that. If you want to support them that way, because that's legal. I mean, they have an NIL thing. Do something like that. I think those are things, to me. Be encouraging about their recruitment. Don't be one of those clowns that jumps in and every time a kid posts something, you take a shot at him, or every time we tweet a story, well, I'm not going to enjoy this commitment because he's probably going to decommit. Like they had 4 decommitments out of 20 some commits, and you want to act like everybody decommitted, but just stop. If you're a negative person, just in general, and all you say is negative things, that's fine. Just don't. Just say it. Type it out. If you feel good about yourself, and then hit delete.
Yeah.
So
I think the biggest, suggestion, Michael, Brian already hit on it a bunch, but social media is the biggest thing where it's just like, stop, man, just stop. Like, can we remember that these are kids at the end of the day? Brian, I know it's easy for like us to say to one another, like, just ignore Twitter, just ignore that guy and stuff. But like as a 17-year-old yourself, you're like, you read that stuff, man. They're reading it. They are. They
shouldn't. They shouldn't. That's part of it. It's like, don't, or make your tweets private where only the people that you allow to respond to you, only people you follow can respond to you. You can do things like that. Because here's the deal. Fans aren't entitled to know what you think and feel about social media. But at the same time, if you're going to make yourself open on social media, you have to understand that there's going to be blowback because there are people out there that just like to be trolls. They like to be negative. They like to tear down people that have success, and they just like to be a-holes. And there's fans of other teams who create fake accounts of Notre Dame. And, they do it to other teams too. And then act like complete morons. And you're like, oh, the account just got started this month. Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that that's not a real person. Like we had a situation like that during the season with a parent of a recruit that was committed to Notre Dame at the time. And, talked to the mom and I was like, you have to understand that like not everybody that's doing that is actually a Notre Dame fan.
Yes.
Like, send me the names of them and I'll let you know who is and who isn't. When you see an account that's just been started that month, you're telling me that person just never had a Twitter account before, just randomly decided to start one and then just bet to bash players. Come on now. Like, let's use some common sense here. But there's enough actual Notre Dame fans who post stupid things on Twitter that you're like, yeah, you're a pretty miserable human being. And that says a lot. And this thing said, hey guys, when someone attacks you, that says way more about them than it does you. Right. So but that's, like I said, that's easy for me as a 44-year-old who's been dealing with this crap for over a decade from people, whether it's on message boards or Twitter, emails. If I could send you every awful thing that somebody said or sent to me or said about me, it's like, man, we'd be here all day. I don't care. Like, I don't read that stuff anymore. It used to bother me, but it doesn't anymore because it's like, that says more about that person than it does me. And if that's what I would say to them.
The Twitter sphere is just so even worse now, Brian, because people can make themselves look legitimate on Twitter so easily now, man. You can buy followers. You can pay $8 a month to get a verification tag. Like you can make yourself look like you actually are somebody who'd be listened to very easily. It's a terrible world right now.
I hate, I get why Elon Musk is doing it. I don't like it.
I think it's dumb.
Just like,
it's so dumb.
They should have kept the grandfather thing in. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not paying.
I'm not paying $8 a month for a verification tag. I'm not doing it now.
Just not. Because now that it can be for everybody, it just doesn't mean as much anymore. And, Twitter doesn't drive much traffic to our site anyway. And if I got to pay for you to drive site to my traffic to my site, then I'm just not going to do it.
Yes.
So it is what it is. But that's why you need to be subscribed to the Irish Breakdown newsletter. So when we do write stories, you can get them sent to you every day. And it's also why you should be on the message board because we put those on the message board every day. I'm just saying. Yes. I'm just saying. It helps us a ton. So anyway, but yeah, honestly, Ryan, I've said this to you a million times. And you and I have a generational gap in how we view Twitter. So imagine what it's like between me and a 19-year-old. You're 30. Right. And you and I have a completely view of social media, different view, because it's been around for most of your adult life. For me, I didn't get my first Twitter page until I was coaching football at Defiance, and I was like 30 something at the time before I even got on Twitter. And I can promise you that if I didn't have to be on Twitter for my job, I wouldn't be on Twitter. I hate social media with the
dude. I fought so many
evil right now.
I fought so many people not to get on Twitter. I think I joined like 4 years ago, something like that. And I was just like, it was like for, to get your name out there type of thing. Right. And I'm just like, I remember fighting it so hard. I'm like, Twitter is stupid. I'm never joining Twitter. And then here I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I'm not saying it's not okay to be critical of players. It's just like, do you feel better like tweeting at them Again, it's a little different with professional athletes. I don't like it. I would never do it, but it's a little different with professional athletes because they're professional athletes.
Right.
When you're like going after a 19-year-old because you didn't like how he played in a football game, come on, man. But again, to the players, that says more about that person than it does you.
Especially when you can hide behind a fake name and nobody knows who you are, just coward stuff, man. Coward stuff.
Yeah, you deal with a lot more of that than I just think people that used to come and troll at me just don't tag me anymore. Number one, I just block people. It's the best part about Twitter is the mute button and the block button. But I think I stopped responding because that's what they want you to do. They want you to respond, and then they get you. That's what's the only piece of advice I've given you, Ryan, when it comes to Twitter. It's that right there. Like that guy's clearly trying to get you into an argument. He's not trying to have a rational conversation with you. He's trying to piss you off.
Hey,
and
man.
when you show that you're pissed off, he wins.
Hey, I'm the voice of the people, Brian. I put people in body bags on Twitter, right?
If you say so. Whatever. All right, let's move on to the next one. We've had our social media question for today. We can move on.
Question from Coach Bent 574. What would be the most versatile non-quarterback skill position? Wait, let me reread that again. What would be the most versatile non-quarterback skill position 5 players? Eliminating offensive line because you don't sub them typically.
So most versatile offensively, I would put Chris Tyree on that list. Obviously, I would put Lorenzo Styles on that list because I think Lorenzo could do things out of the backfield. And we've seen him in high school, Ryan, get direct handoffs on power plays. There was I think it's Pickering North, where he took a 3rd and 1 handoff and just ran a linebacker over. Like Lorenzo's stronger than people think. He doesn't look it, but he's stronger than people think.
Yeah.
But he'd be one. I would say I'd put Benjamin Morrison on there. I think Benjamin Morrison could play all 3 corner positions. And if you watched him in high school, if you needed him to, he could go play some receiver for you. Like I'd put him in there. In that conversation as well. Xavier Watts clearly needs to be in this conversation because I think he could play at receiver, be a Division I player at receiver or safety. There's no doubt about that. So those are the 4. Oh, and Cam Hart doesn't catch the ball well enough for me to say he'd be more versatile. He's got to catch the ball better. I'm trying to think who my next guy would be, Ryan.
Xavier Watts could probably play some nickel too if you needed him to play that.
I mean, he could be a receiver. He could be a nickel. He could be a corner in certain coverages. If you're going to play a lot of zone, he could be a safety. I'm trying to think of who my next guy would be on that. Jeremiah Love. Once he gets here, it'll be Jeremiah Love. Because he could play corner, he could play safety, he could play receiver, he could play running back. Those would be my 5 off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think that we have a similar list. I would also say Joshua Burnham would definitely be one for me. He could – I guess you have to say Jordan Patello too, right? The guy's played rover, linebacker, edge at Notre Dame. So – that one for sure. Jeremiah Love, 100% for the guys that are coming in, no doubt about it.
I was trying to push for them to move Jordan Patello to Mike linebacker a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I think that's a good one, Ryan. He's a very versatile guy. Very versatile guy. That's a good one.
Yeah, he's another one. I think Jalen Sneed-ish is a pretty versatile player. I mean, I don't know.
I'd say he's versatile out of 2 positions. He can do a lot from those positions. I don't know if there's a lot of other positions he could play. And I guess to me, that's what I view a little bit as versatility.
An underrated, I'm not saying he would be a top 5 player on my list for this one, but an underrated versatile player of the 2023 class is Preston Zinter.
Yes.
Because I think he legitimately could play tight end on some teams in Division I level. He could play Mike. I think he could play edge if you needed him to, if he bulks up properly. So I think he's a pretty versatile player as well.
That's a good one. In the 23 class, that's a really good one.
Yeah.
Really good one. Speaking of 23 class, Ryan, here we go.
John A1, will the best route runner on the Notre Dame 23 roster be a true freshman? Ooh.
I don't think so, no. It could potentially be, but I don't think so. I think Tobias Merriweather is a very underrated route runner. And I think he was a very good route runner. That was one of the things I rated him very highly on, Ryan. You remember when I broke his film down. That was one thing. He's a much better route runner than people think. 4-6.
Yeah.
And look, him being a good route runner is going to look a lot different than Rico Flores because their bodies are so much different.
Yep.
But for his body type, he's a very good route runner. A very good route runner. So I think he'll be in that conversation. I think Caleb Smith's a pretty good route runner. He'll be in that conversation, in my opinion.
You know who was A good route runner down the stretch of the season was Jaden Thomas,
Yes.
man. He was breaking off some routes, sir.
His route running is going to look different at 6'2", 220 than what Rico's does. And like Rico's looks different than Jaden Greathouse. Like you and I have debated, you put Jaden Greathouse as the best route runner. I put Rico. I think it's a conversation to have. It's a legitimate conversation to have. I think Caleb Smith, the rookie young Caleb Smith, is a guy that's a much better route runner than people think. So they've actually recruited some guys with some prowess as route runners, which helps. And now it's about taking it to the next level when they get here. But I don't think any of those freshmen are to the point. Now, I'll say this, Ryan. Had they not changed position coaches, then yes, I think you could have made a case that Rico. I'm serious.
Yeah, I hear you.
Because what we saw with kids at Notre Dame before that was a regression as route runners with kids that came out of high school. Like Lawrence Keys regressed as a route runner at Notre Dame. Kevin Austin regressed as a route runner at Notre Dame. Braden Lindsay regressed as a route runner at Notre Dame because as the competition was upped, they weren't taught the things you needed to be taught.
Sure.
So in that case, yes, I think that would be true. But now that you've seen Coach Stuckey do a better job of getting the most out of these guys when it comes to route running, to your point, Ryan, Jaden Thomas was a pretty bad route runner on the first couple weeks of the season. Got slowly better, but about middle of the season when the light went on, I think it was like after the BYU game where he kind of got some confidence because he made some plays. You saw a completely different Jaden Thomas down the stretch to where, Ryan, he went from a guy that in game 2 we're like, that guy shouldn't even be on the field the way that he played against Marshall.
Right.
So by the end of the year, we're like, this was their best receiver. And we don't say that in a, can you believe that freaking Jaden Thomas was their, no, it's not like that. It's like, this dude was your best receiver coming out. And we almost don't talk about him as much now because we just assume so much with him. And where he's kind of proven himself. Now it's just about, can he do it from a volume standpoint? And I found it interesting too on the roster, Ryan. I mentioned how I thought he looked a little leaner, like just more muscular and less pudgy, but he was 5 pounds bigger.
It's wild, man.
The thing. I mean, he's I'm telling you, man. Whew, boy.
You know what's wild, Brian? I'm thinking about last spring, last year, coming into it. So not at the end of the spring, but coming into it. Who would you say was probably the best route runner going into last spring? Avery Davis?
Oh, yes. Very
going
clear.
Into the spring, right?
Oh, very clear. And who basically has said publicly that he taught himself how to run. Right. I mean, that's not me saying that. That's Avery Davis saying that in a podcast. He taught himself how to run routes.
So I'm just thinking of it like this. If you were able to grab Avery Davis from last year going into spring and put him into this spring practice right now to begin, where is he on that list? Because I know Avery's a good route runner, but what is he like 3rd best route runner, 4th best route runner? What do you think about it?
He still might be in the conversation for number 1 because of this, Ryan. He would have even gotten better too because he's finally getting coached. You see what I'm saying? So like, assuming that he doesn't get any better, yes, he's for 2nd, 3rd, 4th, somewhere around there. Right. But I think he would have got even better with a year of Chancey Stuckey's coaching. So I get the point you're making, but yeah, because he was still a guy that he was a 6th-year senior, but he was still learning the game in a lot of ways. But
I was happy.
That's a good one.
I was happy to see Avery Davis was participating in the pro day, by the way. Him and Bo Bauer a little bit.
He ran a low to mid 4.5 from what I saw.
Not bad.
Which for a guy that's basically still kind of coming back from a knee injury, that's pretty good.
And for a guy that's going to have to play a lot inside on the next level, that's not bad at all. It's not bad at all.
Yep, absolutely. I hope he's able to make it. It's still sad. It makes me sad about that knee injury that he suffered because Yep. All right, let's get to some more here, Ryan. I got a lot of great questions today. This is a good. Let me ask this one, Ryan, because it's a sort of an NFL type question. I want to give you first crack at this one. This is from Paul Hamilton, and Paul asks, thinking of the pro day, does Tyler Buckner have a game that can translate to the next level?
In certain systems, yeah. I mean, if you told me that, this is obviously dependent on Tyler Buckner, developing over the next couple of years, right? But if Tyler Buckner develops and he has a chance to play in the NFL, if he's like that caliber of a resume to him, could he get dropped into the Baltimore Ravens system and play in that system? For sure. I mean, yeah, because you can run some QB read stuff, you can run some quarterback run game. That's a system that I think is possible. I mean, Brian, Tyler Huntley made a Pro Bowl last year, right? Like
that was going to be my response. Yes.
That's where we are. So yeah, in certain systems, yes. Are there going to be some systems that Tyler probably doesn't fit well into? Yes, absolutely. But if he's developed properly, there's no reason that he shouldn't have a shot. But again, there's a lot that needs to go into that conversation.
Does he have the talent to be at that level? Yes. Is he there yet? No, because otherwise he'd be starting quarterback in Notre Dame. Tyler has better arm talent, I think, than people realize. He doesn't have a cannon. I think that's the limiting thing, is his arm strength has not taken a jump. But his anticipation, his decision-making when he's on, his playmaking ability, I think all that fits in the NFL. Now, is it starter level or backup level? I'm not sure about that. Right. Here's what I do know. If the light goes on for Tyler Buchner, I don't know what kind of NFL quarterback he's going to be, but he can be an outstanding college quarterback. For sure. And not every great college quarterback is meant to be an NFL guy.
There's a lot that aren't. There's a lot that aren't.
Exactly. Yeah. So, yes. Does he have NFL tools? In some ways, yes. My only concern for him is obviously the technique needs a lot of work. The ball placement needs a lot of work. And his arm strength is not – he doesn't have a bazooka. Yeah. But he doesn't have a weak arm either. You know what I mean?
It's a good arm. It's a good arm.
It's just a good arm. But a lot of that other tools that I like from that regard. So, and some people asking for Pro Day. I don't believe Pro Day was streamed today. We kept trying to find it and we couldn't find it anywhere. So I don't think they streamed it this year on Peacock like they
did. But on Peacock at all? That's such a waste.
Yeah, it's such a waste. I agree. You've got this Fighting Irish TV thing that you're doing. Like, why would that not be on there? It just whatever.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Alabama, Ohio State, and those pro days are being streamed, but like you're missing an opportunity to stream yours. Like,
agree.
Could you imagine how many Notre Dame fans would have watched today just to see Sam Hartman throw the football to Michael Mayer? Like,
if you'd have said, "Hey, Sam Hartman's going to be throwing today," or if you give us a heads up and we'll announce it. And yes, oh gosh, tons. Yeah. That's why I've said before, right? Even if you guys don't want to let us have more access, which you should, there's so many more things you can be doing. And it doesn't have to be like super like great production. Get a camera up there and connect it to your stream feed and just have that camera looking down at Michael Mayer running routes and Sam Hartman throwing it to him on your YouTube channel. Do you know how many hits you'd get on that thing? Oh my gosh. Yeah, it would definitely.
Maybe they should send an email next year asking for donations to make that happen. I don't know.
Yeah. Well played. Very well played, Ryan. I love the saltiness that was behind that. I'm going to read this one too, Ryan, because it's a kind of a draft question for you from Christopher Crosby. Okay. He says, I've been doing my own draft boards for about 15 years or so. I love when people do that stuff, Ryan. I used to do that stuff all the time. That's so much fun. And where do you think Ryan started doing that? I guarantee you Ryan was doing that stuff. Or were you one of those kids in high school where you'd be doing like draft stuff in the back of the classroom and the teacher was like, you're never going to make a living doing that?
I think I started doing draft boards when I was like 10.
Yeah.
Like I
used to get in trouble. I had a biology teacher in high school at Atlantic Shores, and then I had a chemistry teacher at Kempsville. I'd be in the back like doing stats, like and drawing up plays. I'm like, you're wasting your time. You'll never make a living doing that. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I told you chemistry.
Did I tell you my college story? My college story was, my first major when I was in college, my first one was journalism. I was a journalism major.
Yeah,
we were in a class. It was a history class because it was like one of the general courses you had to take. My professor literally asked everybody to write down their major, fold it, and put it in a hat. And he got it all in a hat. He started picking up these notes, Brian, and he'd be like, gen ed, you're not making any money. Journalism, you're not ever going to make a living. Yeah. I'm like, all right, dude. I wish I could go back and be like, hey, doofus. I actually am making money now.
My non-journalism boss takes care of me and my non-journalism background doing, what I consider journalism. Well, I've always said I do journalism. I don't consider myself a journalist, and I take pride in that comment. I take a lot of pride in that comment. So, yes. Yeah, absolutely. But the question, Ryan.
Yes.
I have 15 players with first-round grades. Is this the weakest draft class you have seen in the last decade?
It may be. It may be. I know that's kind of – it's in the conversation for sure. I only have 13 first-round draft picks, first-round grades in this class. It is abnormally – usually I am more in the 17, 18, 19 type of conversation. Christopher, not only is this not a top-heavy draft, in my opinion, we are also seeing the effects of the COVID year for last year's class, Ryan. I think I've said this on this podcast before, but there were 2,100 players that were in the 2022 NFL draft. This year, I think it's like a third that size. It is a much smaller class. There was only 69 players that were early declarations for the draft this year. That's usually in the hundreds nowadays, the last couple of years. So this is a small class.
A lot of kids that came
and it's
back.
not top heavy.
Yeah, there's a lot of kids that have come back. There's still a lot of fit. I mean, guys like Sam Hartman, Phil Dracovic, guys that without the COVID year would be in the NFL draft this year, And so, there's a lot of, and just those are two names off the top of my head that are Notre Dame related, but there's a lot of guys like that.
And it's just not an incredibly top heavy draft. And I think the effects of last year, so many kids coming out and then some kids coming back this year, you're seeing also a volume is a smaller pool to pull from of prospects this year. So it's a fascinating NFL draft this year, man. Very fascinating.
Yeah. It, let me ask, what positions do you, I actually like the quarterback draft class, Ryan. It's not like an elite, not even just at the top. Like I love, I like CJ Stroud and Bryce Young a lot. I think both have question marks. They're not like no brainers like Joe Burrow or Trevor Lawrence, in my opinion. They're not that.
Sure.
How much I mean, we've talked about this. I thought Deshaun Watson and Pat Mahomes coming out were no brainers. I mean, they were stars. I still never understood why they fell out of the top 10. But when we look at some other ones, like I don't view them as that, but they're still both potentially very good quarterbacks. I love Anthony Richards' talent. He's a big red. I mean, you and I were talking about this on the way home from pro today.
Yeah,
he's a gamble. I mean, he's a guy that I said if the Broncos still had their top 5 pick, and they wanted to take Anthony Richardson, saying, hey, we're going to let him cook in the oven for a couple of years behind Russell Wilson. You're not a Super Bowl team the next 2 years, so why not take a chance on a kid with that kind of ceiling? The problem, however, is if he is good, then you only get really 3 years out of him before he's at his second contract. And so that's part of the issue there. But, it's not just those guys. I'm not a Will Levis fan at all.
Yeah.
At all. But there's some other guys in this draft, Ryan, that I like as maybe potential starters. A sort of what's a kid from I'm drawing a blank on the name. The kid from Stanford a couple years ago.
Tanner McKee.
No, that started for
Houston.
Davis Mills.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys like him, in my opinion, in this draft class, meaning like they're not going to be stars most likely, but these are guys that could, be good starters for you in the NFL. Potentially, or at least very good backups. When I look at this class, when I look at guys like, Aiden O'Connell, if I'm in need of a backup quarterback in round 4 or 5, I'm looking at Aiden O'Connell. He can go in there and get me out of a game because a backup quarterback's not going to be a star. He's going to be a backup quarterback. Like Tanner McKee could be a Davis Mills type of starter in the NFL, in my opinion. So I think there's a lot of guys like that I like in this class. Hendon Hooker. If you're willing to look past the knee injury and say, hey, I'm going to give Hendon Hooker a chance. He's a kid that I like in this draft class. So, Jaron Hall's a guy that I could be a day 3 draft pick as a backup quarterback for me if I needed a guy. Guy can come in there, run around a little bit, throw the football. So there's a lot of guys like that, Ryan, that if you're looking for a starting quarterback, there's some of those available. If you're someone who's looking for depth at quarterback, there's some of those available. So I actually think it's a pretty decent quarterback draft class. It's not great, but it's a good NFL draft class. Outside of that, there's not a lot of other positions that I'm in love with. There's some really except for edge. There's some really good edge rushers in this class.
I like edge.
Really good edge.
I think it's a really deep running back class this year. Really deep. I mean, you talk about Bijan obviously at the top, but then you got guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, Tank Bigsby, Sean Tucker. There's, even Deuce Vaughn. Yeah,
the kid from Tulane,
Spears. Yeah. Really deep running back group. I think the tight end class after Michael Mayer at the top is a little bit overrated, but I still think it's got a lot of depth to it. I still do like the class. It's just I think Dalton Kincaid and Darnell Washington should be more in the second round conversation than be mocked in first round. Like that's kind of where I am. But I think it's a deep tight end class. I think it's a deep running back class. You mentioned the edge position. I also think that cornerback, I think a couple cornerbacks near the top are slightly overrated, but that's a deep cornerback group, man. There's a lot of potential starters in that group if you develop them properly. So corner, edge, running back, tight end, I think those are the strongest in my opinion this year.
Yeah. We got one here, Ryan, from, I need to say this name, ND Estimate Trucking LLC. Just love reading that guy's name.
And the question is, yes, in your opinion, between Tai Chan, Rocco Spindler, or Michael Carmody, who has the best feel for the game and the most technically ready to start and be a factor?
Well, I mean, look, that's a great question because he picked three guys that I don't think are easy answers to this. With all three of those, really, we're basing it off mostly high school film. I mean, that's the reality of it. We saw Michael Carmody playing a lot of, 2 games at tackle, and then he got hurt. And he didn't show a great feel at tackle, but how many of those guys would have shown a good feel at tackle as redshirt freshmen? I don't know the answer to at left tackle. I don't know with a bad offensive line coach. I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
I think in high school film, I think Rocco showed a pretty good feel for the game, and so did Tai Chan. Michael Carmody was always a project because he was a basketball player in high school as well. I mean, we mentioned this before, him and his brother were part of a team that I think made it all the way to the state championship game. And Michael could shoot. I mean, Michael, I think it was the semifinal game, knocked down a really clutch baseline three-pointer or corner three-pointer in one of the semifinal games or one of the regional games or something like that, if I remember correctly. But he was always a bit of a project. But I mean, I think Tai Chan shows a good feel for the game. I think Rocco probably is the most advanced of those three. Rocco's problems aren't necessarily feel for the game. It's his feet are really heavy. And when I saw there's a question on there, Ryan, that I think is good to bring up here. Somebody had a question.
I saw that question as well about the weight.
Yes, about him being 325. So I'm going to go try and find that question because I think it's kind of pertinent and good to bring up now. But the question was basically, how do you feel about the fact? Oh, here we go from Keith Wiegand. What do you guys think about Rocco's weight being up to 325?
It's worrisome to me, Keith, to be honest. I mean, I haven't seen Rocco in person, so I don't know what it looks like, but at 315, his feet look sluggish, and then adding another extra 10 pounds, that doesn't sound like that's the fix to me, but right. I don't know.
Now, maybe he completely reshaped his body and he got a lot of fat, added muscle, and maybe that's the case, but that concerned me a little bit because he was a guy that just had really heavy feet and really slow feet. But I never had an issue with Rocco's feel for the game. That was never something that concerned me on film.
Yeah.
The athleticism, and he wasn't an elite athlete. I mean, I had him a top 150 guy. So I didn't think he was like, some people thought he was like a borderline 5-star. I never saw that.
Right.
But I thought he would at least be a good starter, potential starter. And he's really struggled, but his feet just got slow. And I don't know what it was, but I didn't see that in high school. That wasn't something I was overly concerned about in high school, Ryan. Was just the real heavy feet that we saw from him at Notre Dame.
On the other side, to Keith's question, Brian, about him being heavier, it's also a big red flag to me that Michael Carmody didn't gain any weights. Like, that's really scary, man. Like, I don't get, like, does he just not have the frame to handle weight? Like, I don't know what it is. Right. Like, it's not good, though.
That was Caleb Johnson's issue. Somebody asked me, why didn't Caleb Johnson pan out? I said, well, I mean, Caleb Johnson did some really good things in Notre Dame from people I've talked to. Sources within the football program say, man, this kid's a really good pass blocker. Like he moves well. The problem is he couldn't get out of the 270s. And sometimes he would dip down into the 260s. And at the end of the day, you can be good in one-on-ones and be a really good pass blocker in those situations. But you get into a game and you got to drive someone off the ball and you're trying to block Miles Murphy and he weighs as much as you do. You're going to lose that battle. I'm sorry. And that's the problem, and I don't think he has the power like an Emil Wagner has. Like Emil Wagner could play at 280, 285 and probably handle himself pretty well. Sure. I'd like to see him get up to 290 because he's got really heavy hands and a lot of lower body power.
Yeah.
Where he can play a little bigger. Strength. Zach Martin was that way. I mean, Zach Martin plays, Ryan, a lot more physical than you would expect of a guy that's barely 300 pounds. I mean, am I wrong on that? I mean, you've seen a lot more. He plays like a 320 pounder, 325 pounder.
Agree.
But he's not, because he's just got that natural, that torque, that lower body power that it's just there. And he's got this really heavy hands. It's like, Mike Tyson was not very big. He was a very small heavyweight, but he just had, bricks for hands, and he had tremendous hand speed. So he could hit with the same kind of power that a much bigger fighter could hit with. We see that all the time, where Floyd Mayweather was a great fighter, but I wouldn't actually call him like a really heavy-handed guy, where there's other guys his size who, man, they hit you with a hook in the jaw and you are done.
That was like Manny Pacquiao,
Yeah,
Pacquiao had a hook, man. Like that thing hit you, connect, you're out.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I think that there's a couple concerning players in there just from the weight perspective, one to one extreme, one to the other a little bit. Ty Chain, I'm really interested to see this spring, though, Brian, because he's listed at 6'5", 310 like he was last year. But I saw him in a video, man, where I'm like, that dude is
big dude,
massive, man. But it's like good. He just looks like a big dude. It's not like a sloppy like 310. It's like you're put together 310. You've been working with Coach Bayless 310, you know? So I'm really excited to see him.
Yeah. It's gonna be interesting to see what that battle looks like. I mean, if I had to pick right now, I'd probably say it's gonna be Shrouth and Kristofik, even though on the first day both of them were playing left guard, which I thought was interesting. So I would imagine one of them eventually shifts over to right.
Say that again. Kristofik and who?
Shrouth.
Oh, Shrouth. They were both playing left guard.
First day going through drills. Again, we only saw them going through drills. It may not be that way. They may be working on one of them at both sides. I don't know the answer to that, but I thought that was interesting. Yeah. Very interesting.
Next question is from John A1. He says, what does Steve Angeli need to improve on to put himself in the battle for the number 2 quarterback on the depth chart?
Ball placement and timing. Yeah. Those are the two things for me. Steve's issue is it was this way in high school. It was this way. It's funny, some people just trying to evaluate players, and they showed a clip from Angeli at a camp, like 5 clips from him in a camp. They're like, oh, look how well he's spinning the ball. I'm like, not one of those throws was where it should have been. Yeah, it looked good coming out of his hand and it got there with velocity, but like you're running an in cut and you're throwing the ball up here. That's the last place you want to put an in cut. It's like 3 in a row. They were like really high in cuts or high and behind. High and behind is even worse, Ryan, when you're throwing over the middle of the field on an in cut. And you're like, yeah, it looked great, but like that's terrible ball placement. Yeah. That's really Steve's issue. Steve has got good size. He's a quality athlete. I think he's a smart kid. He looks so calm at the end of and again, I know it was a blue gold game, but still, he was a freshman playing in front of the biggest, like 30,000 people. He never played in front of a crowd that big before.
He does always look like that.
Yeah. Yes, running clock, like no timeouts. And the kid just was like, hey, guys, we got this. No big deal. Like, it's all good. Like, we're fine. And he just leads him down there and just, leads him to a game-winning touchdown. And then afterwards was like, yeah, okay, that's just kind of what I do. It's like he's got all those traits. At the end of the day, though, you can't be the guy at Notre Dame if you can't be more accurate throwing the football. That's my big thing. So those are the things he'll need to work on. But the reality is what's going to be hard for him, John, is that Steve has some tools, but he just doesn't have the tools that Tyler Buckner has. In my opinion, even that Kenny Minchie has. I think that's going to be the thing for him is he's got some ability. He's got the presence. He's got the feel for the game. Not feel for the game, the feel for leadership and how that needs to go. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to put the ball where you want to put the ball, and that's something that he's going to have to work on. And Tyler can get away with it because Tyler can do so many other dynamic things that Steve just can't do. And I think that's a kind of where it comes from for me.
I remember in practice last year, he was pushed out of the pocket, Brian. I think he was going against the first team defense, and he was scrambling to his left. And remember, he's a right-handed quarterback, so this isn't easy to throw on the run. But even though he's scrambling out of the pocket, some guys just never look like they're rushed, man. Like he just looks calm the whole time. And I really do love that about Steve, man. So hopefully he takes a nice step forward because there are some intangible qualities to him that I think are interesting, very interesting to develop.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting how he pans out. But he strikes me as a really good kid. He strikes me as the kind of kid you want to root for, you know, just from what little we've seen about him.
Agreed.
No doubt. All right, here's one from John A1. We're getting close to the end of John's questions, Ryan.
Man, John got in there early, like almost always. He says, how does Christian Gray's upside stack up with Chance Tucker and Ryan Barnes?
He's got higher upside than both of them.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, he's faster than both of them.
Yes.
He's much faster. Chance Tucker has a really good feel for the position. He's a very natural, instinctive cover guy. He just doesn't run like Christian Gray does.
Yeah.
And Christian's got some good natural power. Ryan's thing is Ryan's got excellent. He's explosive. He's big. He's long. He can hit. He just doesn't show the coverage instincts. And from what I've been told, his consistency is like he'll have days in practice where he's like, I think we said this last year, but I've heard this from people at Notre Dame, several people. Like there are days where you're like, this is our best corner. This guy has played better than anybody played today, or like a week. And then he'll have a day where you're just like, this guy can't cover anybody. He's messing up his assignments. He's not doing what he needs to do. And you can't have that at corner. You just can't. You can't have a guy that on first and second down looks like an NFL first-round draft pick, and on third down doesn't know what he's supposed to do and gives up a 70-yard touchdown. Can't do that. And that's going to be the big key for him. But but Christian Gray has a lot of those same tools. Great feel for coverage, instinctive, smart, but he's fast.
Yes.
And that's the difference.
I think speed is the separator. I got sent a couple clips, Brian, of Braylon James in the first practice where he was working against Ryan Barnes, and just seemed like Braylon was just beating him off the line, man, and just running by him a little bit, and it's just like, I understand Braylon's fast, but like Ryan Barnes is a third-year player now, right? It's like, let's get the technical side from the line of scrimmage to transitions a little better, and then maybe you can match that speed. I just don't think that he has incredible speed. But I think that Christian Gray has everything that you need to be a very good player at Notre Dame, right? Like he's got the feel, he's got the body type, he's got the length, he's got the speed. Everything's there. It's just you might not see it a ton this year potentially because you have so many good corners on the roster right now,
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's get to some more here, Ryan. Here's from Paul Hamilton.
His question is, I thought Avery Davis retired. Why was he participating in the pro day?
I never saw that he retired. I just saw that he was not going to come back to Notre Dame. Braden Lindsey retired from football. That's who retired.
Yes, he retired. Yeah.
Not Avery Davis.
I still would have loved to see Braden Lindsey just test at the pro day, even if he's not going to go for the
just get a good
to the
workout
NFL.
and go run at the pro day. Yes, 100%. 100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
That's selfish on my part. I just want to see what he'd be able to do as a tester because I think he would have tested very well in several aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get to some more here, Ryan. We got some really good stuff. That was the question about Christian Gray. I thought was a really good one.
It is. This question from Coach Bent 574. If you guys were Notre Dame head coach, who would be on your coaching staff? Current coaches only and no one on the current Notre Dame staff.
Oh, my gosh.
Wait, so can I take head coaches and put them as position coaches? Am I allowed to do that in this conversation?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, yeah. So my defensive coordinator's Kirby Smart. My corners coach is Nick Saban. My quarterback's coach is Ryan Day. Let's see here. My receivers coach is Dabo. All right. So I'm going there. Harry Heastand's my O-line coach. Let's see here.
Oh, he's not a current coach. He's retired. You can't use Harry. He's retired. Not current.
Current coach. He hasn't gone through a season yet, right? He'd been retired before. If I had to go with a current coach and I couldn't use Harry, I'd probably go with Kyle Flood. That's probably who I'd go with. He'd be in that conversation for me.
Yeah.
My offensive coordinator would not be Ryan Day. He'd be my quarterback's coach. My offensive coordinator would be Kalen DeBoer. He'd be my offensive coordinator. Yeah. There's no doubt about that one. I'd have Chip Long as my defensive ends coach. My defensive line coach, I don't know who my defensive line coach would be, Ryan. I'd have to think about that one. I'm not sure I could tell you who that would be. My safeties coach is Mike Elko. There's no doubt about that one. I think he might be in the NFL now, but a guy that I thought did a great job as a D-line coach, I think he was with the Giants for a while. I think it was Sean Spencer.
Yes.
Used to be the D-line coach for the I guess he's back in college now. Is it Florida? Okay.
Yes, he is. Yep.
Yeah,
I saw that before.
He'd be my D-line coach. I thought he did a great job with Penn State coaching the D-line. He'd be my D-line coach. Yeah, he definitely would be there for me. There's no doubt. My running backs coach, if I can't use Dylan, then it's Tony Alford. That's a no-brainer for me. That's a no-brainer. Oh, actually, you know what? I don't know if I would go with Kyle. It's hard for me to go against what Sherrod Moore is doing at Michigan right now.
Yeah, back to back.
Dude. And they're not an overly talented. We said this earlier in the week. They're not an overly talented offensive line. They just play incredibly well together. Yeah. He's doing a great job with them.
And they're not getting like super recruits in there either, right? It's just like he's just coaching them up, man.
Right.
Just coaching them up.
They had Zach Zinner had a decent ranking, and Ryan Hayes had a decent ranking. And it's funny thing is some of their highest ranked guys didn't pan out. They had that Chuck Filiaga guy who was a pretty highly ranked guy. He hasn't panned out. But yeah, I mean, they've had some guys that weren't really ranked that high. Just like you said, there's no one great player. Zach Zinter, you said, is probably their best. But they just play so well as a unit. Right. They replace 2 or 3 starters from last year's team, go get the transfer from Virginia, and they just kept going, just
Plug
kept
it.
rolling. And I think you can make a case that sometimes their O-line this year by the end of the year was better than their O-line was the year before. I would argue that.
Yeah.
I think it was. I would make that case. So because I think their center was so much better. But like you said, Ryan, he's not John Michael Schmitz.
No,
in my opinion, he's not even Jarrett Patterson, in my opinion, as a center. But they were just a really good unit. Just a really good unit. Who'd be my special teams coordinator? I mean, it's Brian. No, you know who my special teams coordinator would be? Because a guy that's done it for a long time and a guy that is not just good in like certain parts of it is, and this is who, there was two coaches that I wanted Notre Dame to hire special teams coach. One is Justin Lester because he's a good friend of mine. But the other one is LeVar Woods at Iowa. His special teams are outstanding year after year after. They rank in the top 5 to 10 every year in special teams at Iowa, every year. And so I think he'd be a guy that I would absolutely look at. Because, again, I can't use Marty Biaggi because he's gone, but he's been their special teams coordinator since 2018, Ryan. I'm going to pull up the FEI rankings and just read these to you because when I was doing research for who I thought Notre Dame should look at, I was like, man, this guy's doing a pretty good job. So I'm going to pull these up for you and give you these rankings. So his first year, right, they ranked 13th. And then 2019, they ranked, let's see here, 3rd. In 2020, they ranked 10th. That was the COVID year. 2021, they ranked 2nd. And this year in 2022, they ranked 12th. So this was his worst special teams he had, and they ranked 12th.
Yeah.
And that's consistently. That's from, that's a guy that's been doing that since 2018, and they've been that way. And so, to me, that impressed me. That impressed me a lot. And here's the thing: the year before he got there, they weren't terrible, but they ranked 22nd in special teams the year before he got there. And Iowa's always had quality special teams, but that guy's been. But that's part of the reason I like him too, is because he has been under a coach who's always valued the importance of special teams play over his career. And he's a guy that played special teams in college and in the NFL. So LeVar Woods would be my special teams coordinator if I had to do that.
Did he play? His name sounds really familiar to me.
I think he was in the NFL for a minute.
Makes sense. His name sounds really familiar to me.
Let me find it here real quick. Let's see here. During his NFL playing career, Woods played for the Arizona, Chicago, Detroit, and Tennessee. Okay. In 88 career games played, he had 168 tackles, 2.5 sacks, 4 fumble recoveries, and 1 forced fumble.
Okay.
So
I think I remember him a little bit as a player. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And he's coached a position. He's coached linebackers. He's coached tight ends. He's done other things during his career. So he could coach a position as well. So, yeah, that's where I would go. That's where I would go. So, yeah, this is a good one. I like those questions.
Yep.
And, Ryan, I'm going to ask this because it's a recruiting question, so I'll let you answer that one. He goes, Nathan Milton asks, what's the skinny on Ryan Wingo and Elijah Rushing?
I mean, there's just not much update on Ryan Wingo. I mean, I'm supposed to be getting a little bit of intel as far as, what if there is a chance that he's going to revisit Notre Dame sometime this spring or summer pretty soon. But I'll say this right now, Nathan, to my knowledge, that visit has not been set up. If Notre Dame gets Ryan Wingo back on campus, I think they have a puncher's chance. But if he doesn't come back this spring or summer, then that's all she wrote, in my opinion, on the Ryan Wingo conversation, right? Yeah. Elijah Rushing, it's a surprising one, man. I mean, this is where I am with Rushing. I would still not predict him to end up at Notre Dame, but the fact that they're getting him for an official visit on the 9th through the 11th, I think is very good sign for Notre Dame. I think it is. I mean, anytime that you can get the kid to come back for his 3rd visit and one being an official visit, you have some sort of chance, right? Again, I still would not predict Elijah Rushing to end up with Notre Dame, but clearly they haven't given up. Clearly there is some attraction to Notre Dame from Elijah Rushing's side. So, again, get him on campus, blow him away, and maybe you have a shot when it's all said and done. But, at the end of the day, you got him coming back on campus, which is a great sign. Get Ryan Wingo. I think you have to get him back on campus. I think you have a puncher's chance. If you don't get him back on campus, then that conversation's over, in my opinion.
Yep. That's a good one. Good one. Here we go from Christopher Crosby, got another one from Christopher. Actually, I'll read this one. It's a draft one for you. He says, where the Ravens pick and the draft board drying up so fast, would it be better trading back into the second round and getting someone like Josh Downs or my steal of the draft, Clark Phillips? I know he's gonna make you happy with that mention of Clark Phillips, right?
Those are two of my favorite players in the draft. I love Joshua Downs and I love Clark Phillips, cornerback out of Utah. I'm trying to remember where the Ravens pick in this draft. Are they?
Let me look it up here real quick, Ryan.
I think they might be late teens. I can't remember, though, because they didn't make the playoffs this year, did they? I feel like they didn't.
No. Yeah, they did. Because remember, they had that big deal where Lamar didn't travel with the team.
Yeah. So they're like early 20s is where they're picking, right?
Yeah,
like
they picked 22nd, and then their next pick is the 86. So the question would be okay, if there's not a lot of difference between a guy picking 22nd and a guy picking 35th or 40th, which I've heard people say, like there's not a lot of difference because I've heard there's decent depth in the draft, but just not a lot of high level guys. Then do you pick up extra picks for next year's draft class, or do you try to pick up extra picks for later in this draft? I think that would be the conversation. But
I think that for me, if you really want a wide receiver, Christopher, for the Ravens, which I think they do, I would hope that they do because their wide receivers are just not a great position right now. I think that you would be better served trading back than sticking at 22 because at like in Brian's situation there, if you're at like 35 or so or 40 or whatever it ends up being, you might have a chance to get a Joshua Downs or a Zay Flowers potentially, or, another, maybe a Cedric Tillman's a guy you like, maybe Jalen Hyatt's still there out of Tennessee. Like there's a plethora of good second round wide receivers in the 2023 draft, in my opinion. I don't think it's a great draft for first round wide receivers. I do not think it is. So trading back, I think, would be a good option. Clark Phillips, man, it's my guy. Everyone's overlooking him now because he's 5'9". It's like, yeah, guys, he was 5'9" on film too, and he was still really dang good. So yeah, I really like Clark Phillips still a lot. He is a guy that day one nickel, but I also think that he could. I think he could play outside in certain defenses. I really do. He's a really smart football player. So good options, I think, if you're the Ravens.
Yeah. All right, next one, Ryan. Here we go. Let's keep rocking and rolling here.
USMA87 said, how did Estimate look in person? The pics I have seen, he looks a little leaner than last year.
Well, I think it's because he didn't have pads on. He's still pretty rocked up to me. So I think a lot of it is you don't have pads on. So he's going to look a little leaner when you don't have pads on. But no, he looks pretty good. And look, this is certain players are going to want to get bigger this time of year and then work some of that weight off. Other guys are going to lose weight and then add it on over the summer months. So that's going to be part of it too. Is this March and April is just part of the process of preparing for August and September, October, November. You're not meant to be in peak shape for like season shape now. You're in March shape. You're in March condition. You're working on different aspects of your body at this time. For some guys, that means they need to get built up a little bit and then refine it, or maybe work some of it off. I got to get the weight on you now so we can then reshape it over the next 6 months. Other guys, it's, hey, let's trim some of that fat off and then build the muscle back up by the time we get to August. So guys are different places. And I hope that Audric is a little leaner because I thought that was one of my concerns about him is I thought he was a little too yoked last year, Ryan, and a little tightly wound, in my opinion. So I wouldn't mind seeing him, maybe focus on, like, if I was the strength coach, I'd say, hey, let's work on building your strength endurance up as opposed to just having you be this monster. You know what I mean? Let's work on, can you do this for 60 snaps if the need was there? And that would be where I would want to have that conversation with Audric. But again, it's nitpicking a little bit because he's pretty good player.
Yes, pretty good.
Yeah. All right, let's get to some more questions here.
Yep. And this one's from Christopher Crosby, who says, if the linebackers don't change and the only improvement they show is they know the system better, can you still win a championship with the defense, in your opinion? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, it can.
Yes. Yeah. My initial thought was yes.
Because what was the only issue they had last year? Knowing the system. Mistakes that came with knowing the system. If the only improvement is they know the system better, they're going to be better.
Yeah, it'll be
There's
better.
no doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
Because the one thing you and I have argued for a while, especially when it comes to like J.D. Bertrand and Marist, athleticism and talent is not their issue. The only guy with a talent flaw is Jack Kaiser, and that's only in certain situations when his lack of length gets exposed. Jack can run.
Yeah.
Jack can move. Jack can come downhill and hit. It's just he's 6 foot, 6'1", with kind of short arms. And there are certain matchups where it's like, why are you asking him to chase over routes against North Carolina, against their slot receiver? I'm sorry, that's more of a coaching mistake than it was a Jack Kaiser mistake. But Jack's not a guy that's going to flip his hips and go run with people. He's a downhill guy. But talent's not their issue. It's knowing the defense. Because if Jalen Steed knows the defense, he's going to be a dude.
Yeah.
If Nolan Ziegler knows the defense, he's going to be a dude. If Marist knows the defense, he'll be better. I still think he has a control problem as a player, but if JD's more locked on, to the defense, he's going to be an even better player. And JD was good last year. JD Bertrand to me is the oddest kid on the team when it comes to what I see on film and what Notre Dame fans say about him. It is the weirdest thing. Like,
we talked about this yesterday.
Hardly any Notre Dame fans that like have good things to say about JD Bertrand. I'm like, what are you watching? I don't get it.
Brian,
we were talking about this
player. We were talking about this yesterday on the show. I'm like, JD Bertrand's going to end his Notre Dame career with almost 300 tackles, most likely, right? And it's just like, he's a pretty good player, man. Like, he wasn't bad. Like,
yes. No, he is. JD Bertrand's a good football player. Now, is he a great player? No. But JD's a good football player. I mean, Ryan, if he has 109 tackles this year, which is only 7 more than he had in 2021, he's at 300 tackles for his career. And he's had 15 tackles for loss the last 2 years and 3 sacks.
That was my favorite. My favorite part is someone in the chat yesterday was like, he only makes tackles 5 yards down the field. I'm like, who was second on the team in tackles for loss last year, right? Like, he had 8.5 tackles for loss.
Again, but where does that, here's the thing, right? Where does that come from?
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing is like, you say that to me and I'm like, no, that's not what I see. I don't know what you're looking at. I don't know what you're looking at. I don't understand where this mantra comes from.
I think Joe Schmidt hurt everyone, honestly, and they just associate every undersized white
linebacker who was JD was so enamored with Notre Dame that he was willing to be a walk-on if that meant he could come here because he came from a family situation where they could afford to put him here. Yep. But he ended up being on scholarship. So I think that thought of him being willing to do that put in people's minds, walk on.
Yeah.
He's not. He was a 4-star caliber kid coming out of high school who was previously committed to Georgia, and so I just don't understand where this anti JD Bertrand thing comes from. And he can't run. Yes, he can. I hate
the extremes, Brian, because it's like you can say that JD is a good, solid football player and still say that you need to get better. Like, yeah, of course. Like, that's okay to say both. It's okay to say both.
He only makes plays down the field. JD Bertrand averaged more tackles for loss this season per game than Jalen Smith ever did in his career.
Yeah.
Because Jalen's best season ever was back-to-back years of 9 tackles for loss.
Yep.
And Jalen, in both of those years, Jalen did that in 13 games. JD this year in 12 games, and if you have to think about it, in 2 games he played, he missed half the games or half the plays. JD had 8.5 tackles for loss this year.
Right.
So is he a star? I'm not saying he's a star. I just don't understand where this anti-JD Bertrand thing comes from. I don't get it. You want to complain about Marist? I get it. You want to complain about Jack being exposed in certain situations? I get it. JD Bertrand was Notre Dame's best linebacker last year by far. And if what's around him gets better, he's going to get even better. So I really don't get this, Ryan. I do not understand. Like, sometimes you can be like, okay, I think you guys are overstating it, but I understand where it's coming from. With this JD hate, I do not understand where it comes from. I really don't. It puzzles me. It really does puzzle me why more people aren't like, this kid's a good football player.
Yeah.
And go back and look at him against Clemson. Like 12 tackles, and 9 of them were solo against Clemson. He was really good that game.
That was probably his best game of the year. That was probably his best game of the year. Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah. All right, let's get to the next one, Ryan.
From Nathan Milton, he says, hypothetically, can you either get Justin Scott or Keon Keeley? Which are you taking?
You can either get Justin Scott or Keon Keeley. Which are you taking? Look, I love Justin Scott, but that's not a question for me. It's Keon Keeley. Keon Keeley was the -- player in the country last year in all of high school football.
And he would be in this class too. He would be in this class too. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. He would be a – yeah. Now, look, I'm thrilled with either one of them. Now, and you could argue, Ryan, that Justin is the bigger need. And I think you can make a case for that Justin – you have other big-time high upside ends. You have other high upside Vipers.
Yeah.
You don't have anyone on the roster like Justin Scott. You could make that case.
Well, yeah, you could say who's a player that helps your team or it has an impact on what the state of your team right now more. And I would say Justin Scott. I mean, 310 pounds. He kind of transitions right in that defense early. I mean, Keon Keeley plays early too because he's special. Like, there's no doubt about that. But to your point, interior defensive line size and impact is more of a need than what the Viper position is, in my opinion, right? So that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's a really good question. I think if I can only pick one, I'm taking Keon, but there is a case that could be made, Ryan, that you have to draft for need, right? At sometimes, and what's better, Keon at Viper and whoever you have at 3 technique, or Justin Scott at 3 technique with Josh Burnham at Viper. That's where you could sell me on Justin Scott. But you'd have to sell me on it because y'all know how much I love Keon as a player. Like, Keon's got star potential. Justin Scott does too, but Keon to me is more ready. And again, this is based on junior film of the 2 players. Justin Scott could come out as a senior and end up being a better player. I mean, we'll see, because he's got tremendous tools. But Keon was a more dynamic player as a junior than Justin was as a junior. And part of that's because Justin was playing both ways. That has to be factored into it as well. He was playing O-line and D-line, where Keon was just a defensive player. So, yeah, it's a good question. And by the way, Christopher Crosby, your question, this question right here, sparked a conversation about JD. That doesn't mean that you're the reason that we are feeling the way we're feeling about fans' views of JD. It's more of looking at it of that led to the conversation of some of the really ridiculous things that I've seen about him said on, especially, I mean, it's mostly on Twitter, but even on our board with some people that I consider to be good posters. Sometimes they'll just say things you're like, wow, like I don't see where you're getting that from. I have no clue where you're getting that from. You want to talk about they need to make a change at will, Rover, okay, we can have that conversation. But JD at Mike is a pretty good football player, and he's a captain. He's a great leader, and but you shouldn't just be a starter because you're a great leader. Joe Schmidt was a great leader, but he's a much different look. I get why people view him that way, as far as comparing him to Joe, but he is a way, way better player than what Joe Schmidt was, and I mean all due respect to Joe, because I think the world of Joe Schmidt, for him to do what he did and get the most out of his ability. And then, and again, Joe was a better player before the injury. He still wasn't nearly as good as JD is, but he was in 2014, Joe Schmidt was a much better player than he was in 2015. A kid like him with his lack of elite athletic tools cannot afford to have the kind of injury that Joe had in 2014. Just can't afford to have it. And a guy like him can't lose a step. And that's what killed him in because he was a solid player in 2014. He was bad in 2015.
Yeah.
He was bad. And a lot of it was just, I think, the injury. He should not have been playing. I mean, play Niles, play Greer, play Jarrett Grace. And I thought the Jarrett Grace, when he got in at times that year, was a pretty good player. He's one kid who I still feel was one of the biggest what ifs of the last decade. I still would have loved to have seen what Jarrett Grace could have done had he not blown his knee out or got his leg tore up. He was like 6'3". He was solid. He was a good athlete. He was instinctive. I think he could have been a dude at Notre Dame. And I think I'd be one if one of y'all listen to Lucky Lefty, if they ever do, I don't know if they do like questions a lot, ask Malik about Jarrett Grace. I'll bet you Malik will tell you that. If he doesn't get hurt, he would have been a dude. But Jarrett Grace coming out of Coleraine, right? I loved Jarrett Grace coming out. And then he got his knee torn up and he just was never the same athletically. I mean, to the point where like he couldn't even it wasn't just like a torn ACL. He had a devastating knee injury. And the fact that he even got on the field in 2015 says a lot about kind of like Jalen Smith, most guys don't even come back at all from that. And Jarrett came back and was still able to play a little bit, but he would have been a dude at Notre Dame if he didn't get hurt. I really believe that.
You said he came out of Coleraine, Ohio?
Coleraine, yeah.
Yeah.
He was part of I think the 2011 class.
Yeah.
But 2011 class. I think he could have been an absolute dude had he not gotten hurt. So he broke his fibula. It was like a really bad injury. Really bad injury.
Fibulas aren't great, man. They're not great.
Yep. Yep. So man, he was really good. And that was in 2013. So yeah, it was a bummer. That was a bummer. But
isn't it crazy that 2013 was 10 years ago now? Isn't that wild?
I know. It really is nuts. It really is nuts. It really is. And in 2013, Jarrett played 7 games and had 41 tackles. I mean, so he was coming along. He was starting to come along. Yeah, he really was. But it's one of the things that I hate about football. You just have that happen sometimes,
Yep. Question from USMA87. Who is throwing to Mayer at Pro Day? It was Sam Hartman.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is awesome.
Now, so I got my thing here. So they did from out in the field, and then they did some red zone stuff. And I'm trying to count here 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. I counted 21 throws to the field, like out in the field, like from the 40 going in, and then from like midfield going in, and not a single ball hit the ground. There was one higher throw, but the guy made the catch on it. He was throwing to Mayer. He was throwing to Jafar Armstrong. And then he was some kid named Hendricks. Ryan, do you know who this was? Some receiver named Hendricks.
Indiana State. Yeah.
Indiana State. We knew he was from some small. I don't know if it was
Dante. I think it's Dante Hendricks.
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Thrown to him, and not a single ball hit the ground. They had some misses in the red zone on some back shoulder stuff, but I mean, he was throwing some great deep balls. And I only have one. I have one wrote down as high. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, and he was thin, like wide fades, go routes, post routes, deep over routes. They were a nice connection out on the field. There's no doubt about it.
That Hendricks kid was a really good player for Indiana State. I was happy. I'm glad that he got to show out at Notre Dame. That's good for him, man.
And then Jafar Armstrong did a pro day with Notre Dame today.
Yeah, he ended up at Northern Iowa,
Illinois. Yeah. Now he might have transferred somewhere else this year. No, he transferred to Illinois from Notre Dame.
Huh.
So he might have transferred like Western Illinois or something like that after Illinois, but he went from Notre Dame to Illinois, and I think he went somewhere else after that.
Gotcha.
But he originally went to Illinois. So here I'm looking here real quick. Some I think it's Western Illinois. Maybe he transferred to Western Illinois his last year.
Makes sense.
But he started his career at Notre Dame and then went to Illinois. So it looks like he had 28 catches for 363 yards this year for Western Illinois, and then had 12 kick returns for 273 yards. Western it was weird. Like he was running routes. And he was like, like he was just like, and I was like, dude, Jafar, what are you doing, man? What are you doing?
Western Illinois, man. And his year as a leatherneck. Good for him.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. All right, let's get to some more here, Ryan. Let's keep rocking and rolling. This is an interesting one right here.
Irish Blooded said, if Notre Dame joined a conference, what is your dream 12-team conference for Notre Dame to honor? Who is Notre Dame and win natties?
Okay.
12-team conference.
What is your idea? I mean, we talked about this before, Ryan.
Yeah.
I've said, look, if Notre Dame should have, instead of like, I wish they would have done more to and again, it's hard because there's TV contracts and all that, but if it was just about, I would have loved to see Notre Dame kind of like start like an American conference or so, or some kind of, big time conference where you take some of the old school independents and a couple of your rivals. So it'd be like Notre Dame and USC and UCLA, but in it's like Penn State, and it's just been a football conference. Take Penn State, take Virginia Tech, try to get, because Florida State wants out of the ACC bad. Yeah. I'd take like Florida State, Miami. I'd take West Virginia, some teams like that. Just take a bunch of the old school independents that are big name programs, and then a couple of your rivals. And I'd put Navy in there. Just, you need to have somebody you can beat up on, right? So, but it'd be something like that. that I would want to have, and just kind of go from there. Probably get a 12-team league. I don't love 12-team leagues, Ryan. I like 10-team leagues, or I like 14 or bigger league teams, right? Because my whole thing is I want to have a situation where, like, I don't actually mind 16-team leagues. Just make your two divisions where you have like one crossover rival, but the rest of it is you're just gauged against your conference, and then you have the conference champion, or your division, and then you have the conference championship game. Like, I feel like if you're 10 or smaller is ideal if you want to play everybody and then have more non-conferences. But to me, it's like these 12-team leagues, it's like, okay, you're playing the 5 on your side and 3 on the other side, or 4 on the other side. It's like, okay, that can work for me, and you're playing everybody, but it's just, I don't know. It's like there's like one team you're not going to play it from the other side. It's almost like you can have, either just don't play anybody on the other side at all, or just like one rivalry game, or just play your division and then, play in the conference championship game or something like that. But I'd rather be 16-team conference where you just basically play eight on your side and then one crossover, and then just, or play 8 and just play your division, and then your 2 leagues play, and for championship, championship game, and then have more. I wish they'd have more non-conferences. The problem is when they have more non-conferences, Ryan, teams end up playing crap non-conference games.
Yeah.
I don't like 9 conference games. I don't. I want to see more crossover. I wish there would be more things where leagues kind of had, you had to play like 2 Power 5 non-conferences, get rid of non-conference games, and then get rid of FCS games unless I would make exceptions. I've said this before. My exceptions would be, it's got to be a state school in your state.
Yep.
And, if you're Florida State and you want to play, FAMU, that's good. Is FAMU a state school? I don't think that they are, but some state school, right? It'd have to be like another state school, right? If you're Georgia and you want to play Savannah State, cool. It's an in-state school. You're helping that program out. You're helping another state program out. Or it's got to be a team that's finished in the top 25 at least once in the previous 3 years. Right? Like, okay, you want to go play Northern Iowa? Go for it. You want to play North Dakota State? Go for it. You want to play Sam Houston when they were balling? Go for it.
North Dakota State would never, man. North Dakota State would never.
Never.
They stopped doing those. They stopped playing a bunch of FBS teams now for some reason. It's like they kind of just want to stay in their bubble now.
They played Arizona this past year.
North Dakota State did?
Yeah,
I thought.
No, Arizona beat them. Yeah. No.
You're right. You're right.
They went through a couple of years, Ryan, where they weren't doing that, but that wasn't because of them. That was because teams wouldn't play them. Like, because they beat Iowa, they beat Iowa State, they were beating teams, and so teams just stopped playing them. And then, of course, 2020 hurt because obviously FCS got rid of football that year, which was really dumb. But yeah, that was a part of it. Is teams just stopped playing them because they were going and playing Division I teams and beating them. Yeah, and they were like, yeah, screw that, man. We're not doing this anymore. Like, you schedule this team and you get whooped by them. A hard pass on that action.
People are going to start avoiding South Dakota State. By the way, too, they can beat. They almost beat Iowa this year. They beat the brakes off of what's their names the year before. They destroyed Colorado State. Remember that game?
Oh yeah,
that game was like 60-something to 30 or something like that. Like, they beat the brakes off of Colorado State that year.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that was.
I like it.
I like when those and like, where did the Dakotas all of a sudden get good at football? It's really impressive.
It really is. It gets underrated too, because South Dakota and North Dakota, not the states, North Dakota and South Dakota are actually pretty good football teams as well. Like, they're not bad either, but it's like, but the North Dakota States and the South Dakota States get all the conversation because they're just dominant.
Yep, they're really good. Yeah. Here's one from Vanilla Chill.
With the Shrewsbury hire, do you see more of a commitment to the B-ball program by Notre Dame?
I hope so. I mean, look, y'all have to understand something about me. I'm a show me guy when it comes to Notre Dame right now. You got to show me. From what I've been able to read, again, we don't cover basketball at Irish Breakdown. I've written 2 articles noting that the Shrewsbury hire, but like, I'm not like beating down the door trying to get scoop from people. Yeah. But from what I've been able to gather, it does seem that Notre Dame actually got into a bit of a back and forth with Shrewsbury for that. So, like, I don't know if Penn State eventually came with an even bigger offer, but Notre Dame didn't necessarily have to outbid for Shrewsbury. They just had to get close enough to where he could because he's an Indianapolis guy. He spent most of his coaching career in Indiana. He coached. He was the head coach at Indiana South Bend. He was an assistant coach under Brad Stevens at Butler. He spent 2 different stints at Purdue under Matt Painter. And then outside of that, the 2 years at Penn State and then his time with the Celtics working for Brad Stevens were his only time out of the state. So you just had to be competitive. And from everything I've been able to hear is Notre Dame made a pretty good offer to him. He's going to make over $3 million a year.
Nice.
Almost 4, depending on who you talk to. I think Tom Noy from South Bend Tribune reported it's not quite the $4 million offer that people are saying it is, but it's at least in the ballpark, which is a good offer. So you didn't get outbid for him. So that's a good first step, right?
Yep.
But also, it's not like Penn State's Duke. They're not throwing as much money at a basketball coach as Duke is or Syracuse is either.
Sure.
So I think it's a good sign, but it's going to be more about, okay, fine, you're paying him, but here's the rub. Are you going to then say, okay, but because we're paying you more, we're not going to give you as high of a assistant coaching salary as we did before? We're not going to work with you on getting kids into school that, those are the things that you'll really find out about whether or not they're really serious. But I hope it is. Look, here's the thing. Jack Swarbrick, as much as I like to bang on him, I want to be fair. I'm not going to bang on him just because. They did spend a lot of money on getting a new basketball facility. Now, was it late? Yes, it was late. But it's still, from everything that I've been able to see, it's a really good basketball situation. I mean, Mike Bray just signed a really good recruiting class a year ago. They got a 5-star in J.J. Starling. The Vin Lubin kid is excellent. Now, obviously, you've lost J.J. Starling. He's at Syracuse now. But, I mean, they were getting kids and that stuff helped. So, if you support it, yeah, I think basketball team can be pretty good. Because the other thing, too, is Notre Dame's the kind of school that can recruit. Like, I don't think that Notre Dame needs to recruit the 5-stars a whole lot. If you can get a local guy, if you can get a Blake Wesley and a J.J. Starling to fit in, great. But I think Bray's recipe of getting the veterans that are going to stay for a long time is where Notre Dame needs to be.
Yep.
His problem wasn't that. His problem was you got some good pieces, but then you'd have complete whiffs on other things. Like, because you're having to play Nate Laszewski like he's a big because you failed to recruit that position worth a darn. And so now Nate has to play in the post more and defensively more, but he needed to be a pure stretch 4, playing more 3 than 5. And that's where he failed. But he just had a bunch of the same dude on his roster. And they played no defense whatsoever. And it just had gotten stale. But Notre Dame did not lack for quality basketball talent this year. They just the place had just gotten bad, and it was just the roster wasn't put together well. So Notre Dame's been trying from an administration standpoint to be better at basketball. I just think the timing of it, they should have supported Bray more 10 years ago.
Sure.
And not waited till now when it's the rest of college basketball's caught up to him offensively. And now the fact that his teams can't defend is even more exposed because they're not the unique team offensively they used to be. So I think you can criticize him there, but recently they've been doing what they need to do to support it. I think the issues lately have been him more so than the administration, if we're being fair. Yeah. Now, that wasn't always the case. For a while there, the administration was the problem. But like, he's made some bad hires. He brought some guys in that were former players. They got in trouble or they didn't pan out. There's been some issues there. But I mean, that's on him. Right. That's more on him. So, but I think they can get, it's an interesting situation too, because there's going to be no expectations for Micah Shrewsbury next year. None. He's going to have basically a brand new roster. I mean, just a completely brand new roster. So, I mean, I saw Cormac Ryan's going to the transfer report. I'm like, how first? I didn't even realize that guy still had eligibility left.
Seriously. How long has he been playing, man?
Yeah.
It's wild.
But J.J. Starling's already at Syracuse. I mean, you're gonna be completely revamping. You're losing a bunch of dudes to not being no more eligibility left. They're going to be a completely brand new program. And Bray had just done such a bad job really just keeping this roster where it needed to be. But from everything I've heard, I like the hire. People have sold me on it. I didn't know a lot about him other than, I think I had it. Ryan, what would my article say? This year was the first year that Penn State had won an NCAA tournament game since like 2006 or something like that.
Yeah.
Hadn't even been in the tournament in a decade. you know, and they look, second round game, they went down to the wire. They competed. I think it was Texas, right? They played Texas in the second round, I believe. And it was a heck of a game and just lost it late, you know, but he did a great job there. He really did a really good job there.
I want to get back to relevance, Brian. You know what stinks about this year is that it's been a really entertaining NCAA tournament, but I didn't get into college basketball at all this year because Notre Dame wasn't relevant, man. Right. I was just like, when Notre Dame's good, I follow college basketball a lot more. When Notre Dame's not good, I barely watch, if I'm being honest, right? And like I watched some of the game last night. Did you see the Kansas State game last night between Michigan State and Kansas State?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was a fantastic finish, man.
Did you see that fake that they did where the guy's like trying to argue this coach and they're setting up a lob? I was like, oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's
really
beautiful. Nice. That's beautiful. Yeah, I forgot that. I didn't even know who their head coach was, Kansas State, because I just didn't follow basketball this year. I'm like, hey, Bruce Weber's not there anymore?
Bruce Weber.
And Frank Martin's not their coach anymore. What happened?
Yeah.
He took them to the Elite Eight, right? Frank Martin.
He did. So, that was a good team. That was like Jacob Poulin and those cats right back then. And that was no pun on them being the Wildcats, by the way. It was just the cats.
Brandon Pleasant has a response to our stuff about JD Bertrand. He says, we would like more athletic linebackers like the Sneeds and Osbury's and Bowens, which is why LB recruiting is so frustrating. Some more length would be nice as well. But that's where I think you're missing the boat, Brandon, is JD Bertrand's an athletic kid. That's what I don't understand. Like, JD Bertrand's a pretty good athlete. There's not a lot of difference in athleticism between him and Drake Bowen. There's not.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Now, Jalen Sneed's a bit of a unicorn athletically, but there's not a huge gap between JD Bertrand and Jaden Osbury and Drake Bowen athletically. There is size-wise between Drake, but he's a much better athlete than Notre Dame fans give him credit for. I mean, much better athlete. I just don't get that. Why? And Brandon, someone I respect, but like that, JD can run. I mean, can he run like Jalen Sneed? No, but he can run.
And also, I would say, I mean, we're talking about recruiting here a little bit too, right? I mean, 2024 recruiting, linebacker recruiting is a mess, Brian, but do you think they're recruiting a bunch of undersized, not athletic kids, though, at linebacker? I wouldn't say that. No, I mean, there's some wild cards.
Cahoon kid athletically, to be honest with you. But like,
Cole
Sullivan,
but he's still
an athlete.
Yeah, but even Bodie's still 6'2" with solid length, though. Like, he's not a short dude. Like, you know what I mean?
This year, I don't like I'm frustrated by the linebacker recruiting, sure.
Yeah.
But it's also coming 2 years in a row after really good classes. And it's not a great year at linebacker anyway.
Right.
It's not. So, I mean, I get that, but some of the 2025 linebackers we've seen so far are pretty long and pretty dang athletic. I mean, I think part of the issue with 2024 class, Ryan, is there's some frustrations at positions that just aren't strong classes nationally.
Yeah.
You know, and I think some kids just aren't getting the love because they're not ranked real high. Like the safety, I mean, Jalen McClain, and it's a really good. I don't care what his ranking says. That's a good freaking football player.
Yeah.
So, give me that kid. It's a good football player.
Yeah, I agree. I think the biggest push for me back on the JD Bertrand thing is I don't think JD Bertrand is unathletic or anything. I think JD lacks size, which causes him to miss tackles at times. I don't think he has a great tackle radius, but I don't think he's unathletic. No, I don't.
Sure.
That
I mean, the length thing with JD, I get, and that was the issue that he had a little bit in coverage as a will, and why he missed tackles as a will. But I think as a Mike, we haven't seen as many of those issues. You saw some out of place issues, but that was across the board, and that was more, again, that's more of a coaching thing. That's why you get first like, put the young guys in. If these fifth seniors can't figure the defense out better, you think some freshman's going to figure the defense out better? The problem was the coaching, not necessarily the talent in some of these positions, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So JD can run.
See, man. We'll see.
He can run. I get that people don't think he can, but JD can run. He can run. I mean, Drew White ran like a 4.6. And Drew White's 40 time was almost identical to Nakobe Dean's. Actually, he was faster than Nakobe Dean.
4.67 or something, right? Yeah.
So, which for a Mike linebacker is running well. His problem is he did that at 220.
Right. Yeah.
And at 220, you need to be a 4.5 if you're going to play at the next level. But 4.6.7 is still moving for a middle linebacker.
Yep.
And I'll be willing to bet you a steak dinner, Ryan, that JD Bertrand runs a better 40 time than Drew White does. And
very possible.
I'd be surprised if he doesn't run a better time than Drew White did, because he plays faster than Drew. That's for sure. And Drew was a solid football player too. He just was small.
Yes.
That was the problem. He just was small.
If your conversation is that, again, like I always think that you want to improve, right? Like you always want to shoot better, shoot higher, better caliber players. But if the length thing is the biggest conversation, like cool, man, I'm there. Like if you want a lengthier middle linebacker, I'm good with that. I get that. That's the margin for error thing we talk about all the time, right? Like guys that have length have a larger margin for error at times. Like that's kind of where we're looking at. So if that's the conversation, sure. I just fight back against the athleticism thing. I don't think he's a bad athlete. I think he's not long. He's not a long dude. There's no doubt about that.
Right. Here's an very interesting question, Ryan.
From Nathan Milton, you're surrounded by a bunch of angry fans who are about to start something. Which IB staffer is most likely to talk their way out of it? Talk their way out of it. Huh.
I don't think we have anybody on staff that would be able to. I think we would all have the same.
Sean Stiers, maybe.
Yeah, Sean Stiers, maybe.
Yeah.
But no, but hey, if you knew Sean like I knew Sean, Sean's fiery. Like Sean doesn't take any BS. Like he has this like really good demeanor on radio and on the shows, and he's very like and he's a good host, and he'll allow the co-host to talk more and set people up. He's a good interview. He's experienced. That's why I hired him. Yeah. You knew him personally. Sean's got a bit of a temper like I have and like you have. And I told y'all at the Ohio State game, Vince was like purposely bumping into Ohio State fans because he's pissed about how the game went. So like I'm trying to publish a story, and Vince is supposed to be like staying in front of me so I could like do this and not bump. And Vince, I look up and Vince is like peacocking in front of, trying to purposely like get a story by bumping into people because he wants someone to say something to him. And I'm like, Vince, come on, man. And Sean, Ryan, my temper. So,
I'm not confrontational. I would just,
he's right.
Yeah.
You're so full of it.
Peace and love, baby. Peace and love.
Maybe Sean Stiers. I don't know. Cause he's got that veteran wisdom. I guess that's my best answer, but I don't know if any of us have the temperament to talk our way out of it. I think we'd all probably rather fight our way out of it. So who knows? But yeah,
someone said Vince would throw the first punch.
Oh, Vince would absolutely. Vince would like jump on the other side and like get in their ears, like trying to instigate stuff. That's what Vince would be doing. Yeah, that's absolutely what Vince would be doing. No question. Vince would throw the first punch. Facts. Facts.
From Vanilla Chill. He said, can you see Avery Davis making at least a practice squad if he can be healthy enough for camps for NFL teams? Yes. I think so. Look, Vanilla Chill, here's a little piece of it's not that much of an intel. I think I've said this on the show before. But so there's one entity that goes around and they do the spring scouting every year. It's called NFS. NFS had Avery Davis, one of the scouts for them, had him with a 7th round grade coming into the year this year. So they had a borderline draftable grade on Avery Davis. I think Avery Davis was well liked in NFL circles. The question now is, coming back from the injury and everything, right? Like that's kind of the biggest question mark with Avery. But would it shock me if Avery Davis is on a practice squad next year? Absolutely not. Mm-mm. Would I be shocked if Avery Davis lasts in the NFL for like 3 or 4 years? Mm-mm. No, I wouldn't either. Like I think
it's possible. Play longer than that. I really do. It's if he's healthy, Ryan, because I still think he's a very raw football player because he hasn't really been coached. If I'm an NFL team who runs an offense that requires quickness and good route running and all that kind of stuff, I'm going to try to sign him and stash him away on my practice squad for a year or two in hopes of kind of getting him coached up and getting him back, and then maybe I might have something. But, I think he'd have a shot to do that. I'm not betting on it because of the injury. I think the injury is, because he's had the problem is he's had multiple lower body injuries. And I don't think he was a kid. He's athletic, Ryan, but I don't know if he's athletic enough to have that kind of injury history.
And he was underdeveloped, obviously, with coaching early on in his career and some position changes too. Like this year would have been great for Avery to really take his game technically to another level as well, So he missed out some time, unfortunately.
Yep, absolutely.
Next question is from John A1. Is Chris Tyree still the best home run threat in the running back room?
Yes, but it's not the gap that it used to be.
Yeah.
And it used to be like it was not even close. But now with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, you have 3 legit home. And when we say home run threats, like look, Logan Diggs had a 75-yard touchdown last year, right? Tony Jones had an 85-yard touchdown. And, the Broncos went years where they had very few Notre Dame guys. You had Ryan Harris for a minute and David Bruton for a little bit. And for whatever reason, the Broncos just haven't been a big pro Notre Dame team. I'm very happy to see that they signed Mike McGlinchey and Tony Jones Jr. This offseason. So I have a little bit more of a reason to watch and root for the Broncos now that there's some Notre Dame guys on there. So that'll help a little bit. But yeah. I mean, you've got 3 legit home run threats now with Tyree, Jadarian Price, and Jeremiah Love. No doubt.
Yes.
No doubt.
And they're all different styles of home run threats, which is cool too, right? I mean, it's like neither one of those guys is as fast as Chris Tyree, obviously, but like those 2 other guys are going to maybe break some more tackles to get more opportunities to break into the open than maybe a Chris Tyree will. So it's just a different style, which is fun.
Yeah. All right. Let's see here. Let's get some more here, Ryan.
From Christopher Crosby, has there ever been a reason given why Junior Tuihalamaka is playing Viper? To me, he screams middle linebacker. Do they just want to get him on the field until JD is gone? I think his JD is solid, so I would get that.
I think that would be a mistake if that was the reasoning.
At his age, especially. Still developing.
You're going to waste, because it's not like he redshirted last year. He blew his red shirt on special teams alone. Yeah. So let him learn there, and then maybe cross-train him at Viper for certain looks if you want to. But I mean, they flat out moved him.
Yeah.
So no, I don't know if they just I don't know. It's confusing. I don't know what Al Golden wants, Ryan. I can't figure out what he wants. And part of it's because he hasn't been here long enough, right? So, but he's not recruiting a lot of guys with junior size, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But then when you do get guys here, you keep talking to them about get your weight up. I mean, well, figure it out, dude.
You already had a guy with those weight up. Yeah.
But I thought he moved. I thought he looked great in the spring game last year. I thought he did. I mean, I thought he moved well. He made tackles. He played side to side. I was shocked when they moved him. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Sure.
It really didn't. And maybe he didn't look fast in the fall because you were asking him to do so much mentally and he wasn't playing fast. But I think it was a mistake, in my opinion. I really do.
Question for We Are Not Marshall. I feel like we haven't heard from you in a while, sir.
Yeah.
Alabama moved Jahmyr Gibbs all over the field last year with great success. Can Notre Dame replicate that with Chris Tyree?
No, not really. He's a different type of athlete. I mean, they could move him around a lot, which we've advocated for, but not the same way you did with Jahmyr Gibbs, because Jahmyr's a lot shiftier than Chris Tyree. Chris Tyree's more explosive vertically. Not that Jahmyr's slow, but Chris Tyree's one of the fastest players in college football.
Yeah,
but Jahmyr's more shifty.
I think Jahmyr ran like 4.36, so he's pretty fast as well. Yeah, to your point.
But he did not play like a 4.36 guy. He's shifty. He's quick. He's agile. He's elusive. Chris is a straight line guy. So with Jahmyr, I'm running a ton of screens with Jahmyr. I'm getting him in space. With Chris, I want to get him a crease. Get him a crease, and he's going to go. With Jahmyr, it's get him in space, and he'll make his own crease. You know what I mean, Ryan? Yeah. And Chris can't do that. That's not who Chris is.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you can use them both around, but Jahmyr's a guy that you just got to figure out a way to get the ball in his hands and get him in space and then let him do his thing. With Chris, it's get him in space, but then design it in a way where you're trying to get a crease where he can outrun people.
Yeah.
And that's my big thing. So they're just different. And Jahmyr's bigger. Like, he's a little bigger than Chris is as well, especially
he's like 200 pounds. Yeah.
And he's like, what, 5'11"-ish or so?
5'10",
right?
5'11", something like that. Yeah.
Chris is 5'9", so I think that's part of it as well.
Yeah. I think that's a good note. Yeah. I think that's a good note. I would say Jahmyr is just a little more creative out in space than what Chris is. But when you give Chris a crease, then you're cooking with grease. Like, that's where you're
absolutely. At. Absolutely. No question about it. Ryan, I'm going to ask this one because it is a draft question. Vanilla Chill, Ryan, Broderick Jones, Peter Skoronski, Paris Johnson. Who do you think is the best among them in the draft? Also, who do you think would fit the Bears the best out of them?
So I think this is a great conversation between floor and ceiling on this type of conversation piece. I think out of Paris Johnson Jr., Broderick Jones, Peter Skoronski, Paris Johnson has the highest upside, in my opinion. You know, you're talking about a guy in Paris Johnson that is 6'6", 310 plus pounds, 36 plus inch arms, man. His length is just ridiculous. And he's a good athlete. I don't know if people saw his pro day film yesterday, Brian, but they did this nice little, he had to jump up and then he had to work in a vertical set and he had to quickly switch both stances, which was pretty wild, man. He was really smooth. The big thing about Paris Johnson, though, is that Paris Johnson only played 1 year at left tackle. He was a starting guard previously. So, like, he is not near to his ceiling because he only started 1 year at left tackle for Ohio State. So long-term upside, I think he has the most of the bunch. I would say the next highest is Broderick Jones because Broderick Jones has really nice foot quickness. He's a boulder, man, like great base that he plays with. But Peter Skoronski is the highest floor of the group. He's the best football player on that list right this second. But there's going to be questions there's going to be some teams that just aren't going to have Peter Skoronski on their offensive tackle board. There's going to be some that look past the arm length conversation and they leave him a tackle. There's going to be other teams that just aren't even going to bother to watch the film on if he can play offensive tackle or not. They're just going to say arm length, you can't do it type of conversation. So I would say Paris Johnson has the highest upside, followed by Broderick. Highest floor, though, is Peter Skoronski. Who fits best for the Bears? I think if you get any three, they're an upgrade over what you had last year, man. Like, it just was not great for the Bears last year. I know you got to steal in the left tackle, Braxton Jones, who's out of Southern Utah. I thought he played pretty well at left tackle for a 6th-round rookie. But whoever you get in this class, I think is going to be an upgrade at least one of the offensive line positions for the Chicago Bears. I would personally, if all three are on the board, I think I would take Paris Johnson just because I think that upside is just so tremendous and you need a true blindside kid. But all of those three upgrade your offensive line. They just do.
Here's the thing with Paris Johnson too, Ryan. If you truly believe he has the highest upside and it's somewhat significant, and I would say you can make a case for that, then I would say you have to kind of go with him because the Bears aren't a Super Bowl team next year.
No.
They're hopefully in 2-3 years you can build to that point, right? So you take that with the higher ceiling. Peter Skoronski has the highest floor, and I would say that Broderick Jones is in the competition with him for floor. I think for me, Johnson and Jones are the two that I would go with. I'm still not 100% sold that Skoronski can be a tackle in the NFL. I'm still not 100% sold just because, I've got my reasons, but the other two kids to me are for sure tackles. And I'll be honest with you, Ryan, when I first got into this, kind of looking at this draft class, I was not a huge fan of Broderick Jones. Thought he was good coming out of high school, but he was kind of good, okay last year, but I was like, okay, let me just I never really noticed him, right? Never stood out to me.
Yeah.
But, when I went out and really studied more film, I was like, okay, yeah, this guy's pretty good, especially if you're a team that wants to run the football.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Plays with a great base. He's got the best base in the class, in my opinion, man. Yeah. He has just this really wide, powerful base, always seems to be on balance, his base never gets skinny. And that's one thing about Paris Johnson that is an inconsistency right now is sometimes his base gets a little narrow, right, and that affects his power profile because Paris Johnson's a strong dude, man. He's really powerful. But when you get that narrow base, you kind of lose a little bit of that power. Yep. Well, not a little bit. You lose a lot of that power profile. So there's some baseline things that need to get figured out in that regard. But I think that Broderick has a substantial floor, in my opinion. And he has offensive tackle traits. He's got 34+ inch arms. He ran sub 5 in the 40-yard dash. He tested really well. He's got all the traits to play offensive tackle at the next level.
Yep. And look, Peter Skoronski would not be the first 32.25 inch arm length guy to be a really good tackle. We've seen it. It's
rare. It's rare.
Yeah. And I don't know if he necessarily has the rare traits to be he strikes me a lot like a Zach Martin. This isn't to say I don't like Peter Skoronski a lot. If you needed a right tackle or a guard and you wanted to take him, sure. Okay. I think with the Bears specifically, Ryan, I think they need a left tackle. Would you agree with that? Like if they could move the kid they had last year over to right tackle and have like a true like top 10 caliber NFL draft caliber talent at left tackle, wouldn't that be better for them? Yeah. Don't you think?
Yeah,
and that's where I'm coming from. Where I don't know if Peter Skoronski is that guy. That's kind of where I look. It's like, would you be better off having Paris Johnson and Broderick Jones at left tackle and the kid you were talking about at right tackle, or that kid stay at left tackle and Skoronski moves to right tackle? That's kind of the way I look at it. I don't know if I would want Peter Skoronski playing left tackle for me, but that's obviously just my opinion. I know there's NFL teams and NFL scouts that don't agree with me on that, and
sure,
take their word for that.
There's never a consensus among NFL teams. I've learned over the years.
Yeah, even when there should be.
Yes,
even when there should be.
It was like I liked RG3 and Baylor, but it was just like Andrew Luck, man. Like, what are we thinking of? What are we talking about here? It's just so easy. But yeah.
Here we go. Let's get some more here, Ryan.
Ian Johnson said, can you explain how stretch, wide zone, split zone, outside zone, mid zone, and inside zone attack a defense? Man, it's a very
First of all,
question.
a lot of those things are the same thing.
Yes,
So
outside zone, wide
stretch
zone.
and wide zone and outside zone are all the same thing, basically.
Yep.
The difference between stretch and outside zone, as we've talked about, is angle of the ball carrier. Stretch is more of a pistol under center zone. Outside zone is more of an offset wide swipe kind of thing. Inside zone and split zone are the same thing. Split zone simply refers to you're bringing someone from the front side to the back side. Whereas
usually an H-back,
right, tight end, something like that. A second running back if you're in like 20 personnel. Whereas inside zone, you just line up with the tackle backside and he just blocks the inside C gap, and that's just it. It is what it is, right? So it's the same play. Mid zone is different, but even mid zone, teams do mid zone differently. You know, Jim McNally will do different in the mid zone, a little different than some of the air raid teams that run mid zone. So essentially, inside zone and is a quick hitting downhill play. The way that it was explained and kind of how we taught it when I was coaching Ryan, and again, this is a while ago, it may be different now, is a slow swipe versus fast swipe. Yep. Inside zone is more of a slow swipe play. It's a power running play. You're trying to get vertical movement. Okay, so you're going to run double teams. Teams will run it differently. I know some teams, Ryan, that would run inside zone to the tight technique, so that shade, the nose, the shade, or the inside of the guard. So that'd be a 1. Some people call it 2I. I've seen it called different things. And they'll run it to that. The way we always and that's how we ran it. We ran it to the tight technique because we wanted to cut behind the 3 technique or the 2. Other teams will run it to the 3 technique because they want to run it backside. I mean, I never ran it that way, but I know teams that do it that way. So inside zone is a vertical play. You're going to, depending on your footwork, you're going to open cross and just get downhill. You're going to attack the inside butt of the guard to your call side with the design for it to cut back. It's a cutback play. So if you want to run inside zone and you want the blocks to be behind Quentin Nelson, you actually don't call it to the left. Call it to the right. And then you're cutting behind it. And so it's a backside play, even when it's a vertical, and it'll be a cutback. And that's something that'll make a little bit different, where you could end up cutting behind Quentin Nelson on an outside zone to the right, but it's a vertical insertion. It's just the way that it goes. But inside zone, downhill, power run, you've got to have somebody to account for the backside edge. You can do it 3 ways. You can do it with split zone, where you bring someone from the front side to the backside. The reason you do that, Ryan, different reasons. Number 1 is you like the angle. You think the way that they play the edge, you like the inside out angle better to seal that backside's one reason. Number 1. Number 2, sometimes that cross action can kind of create a little bit of, okay, where are they going with this from the linebackers? Yep. And number 3 is just you're trying to use your formation to manipulate their alignment in a way that sets up the inside zone better. Those are primarily the 3 reasons that you're going to do that. And so that won't be what determines whether you want to do a split zone or an inside zone. It's the same play. If you go watch, for example, Chris Tyree's 90-something yard touchdown against Syracuse, or his 20-something yard touchdown against Clemson back in 2020 in the ACC championship game, that was just pure inside zone. But if you go watch Logan Diggs's touchdown run against South Carolina, it's the same exact play, blocked the same exact way with the offensive line. It's just split zone. So you had somebody coming from the backside. Same exact blocking scheme. Hits the defense the same exact way. You're just manipulating them differently, or you may want to get a better angle. Downhill, vertical push play, hard double teams at the point of attack, working to the second level. You don't leave the first level until there's a reason to. So you're not going to leave the first level to go find the second level guy. You go to the second level when you get off your double team, when that guy flashes, right? So you see color coming across. I got to come off. Hopefully that guy's taken over by now, and you get there. You also don't leave your double team if you don't feel or you don't get the call from the guy you're working with that I got it. Let the linebacker try to make – the back's got to make somebody miss, because otherwise we got 2 guys coming loose. And I'd rather the running back have to make him play off the linebacker than a 3 technique that's coming in, right? That's just kind of how I always was taught it. Outside zone is something we call a fast swipe, meaning we are working. In inside zone, you are power stepping, man. You are short power stepping, vertical insertion, vertical push. Outside zone, you're bucket stepping and you're moving. You're getting wide and you're essentially trying to stretch the defense. Now, what I think a lot of people misunderstand about the inside zone run, they think you're trying to stretch it to the outside. It's not an outside running play. You can bounce it out that way. You'll see mid zone actually bounce outside the tight end more than you will see that from a outside zone. What you'll find a lot of times, like outside zone and buck sweep, Ryan, which is a different play, it's a gap scheme, but you'll see it actually cut behind the center and guard. Because what happens is you're working, and the stretch comes from you're stretching the defense out, not that you're stretching outside. So the stretch comes, we're going to stretch, which widens gaps and creates vertical insertion. And you see, go ahead, Ryan.
I was just going to say you're creating a crease with movement. Like that's just kind of the basics.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you'll see like the Broncos used to run this a ton with Terrell Davis. We had Terrell Davis mentioned her, and they would toss it because this is back when under center was more. They would toss it, and Terrell would literally like jog to the right until he saw, and then boom, he would explode vertically into the hole.
Yeah.
Right. And so into the crease. It just hits completely differently. It's funny as the fast swipe hits slower from the back standpoint, but the linemen are working fast laterally. It's a lateral blocking scheme. You may actually give ground a little bit on an outside zone.
Yes.
It's okay. It's fine. You're okay with that. Inside zone, it's a push. So the other thing too is if a team is condensed, you want to run outside zone at them. And I'll tell you where I really liked when a team would play really tight with their technique, that's when I loved stretch, Ryan, because I actually like stretch to bounce against teams that do that. And we're outside zone, like on a fast outside, like on a handoff or a toss, and you gotta be patient. Stretch to me is get downhill, and if a team's playing really condensed, then I like to kind of have like a little crack. Maybe you can get like a little cross block, maybe the tight, like just a little off the edge cross block, stretch and take that sucker outside. But you want to get outside when teams are tight. When teams are spread out a little bit more and more of a balanced alignment, that's when you can just hammer them with inside zone. That's why I love inside zone with RPOs. I think RPO is one of the best things ever happened to the inside zone, like because now you can run that and you've got something with your pass game to occupy that over, because that can be sometimes the hardest guy to block on inside zone is that overhang, like rover outside Sam linebacker guy.
Hard to account for him.
Yeah. You're trying to get a receiver to block him. Well, now if that guy wants to get all sneaky and he wants to peek inside and crack, I'm pulling that sucker and throwing the bubble screen.
Yeah.
That's why I think rover, I think that RPO was a great thing for duo and especially for inside zone. If you can properly combine an RPO game out of 11 personnel or even 21 personnel with a second back out with your inside zone, it's a beautiful thing, man. It really is if you have a good offensive line. So I think, does that kind of answer the question, Ryan? Mid zone is, I mean, it's kind of a little bit of both. It's a little bit more of a wider blocking scheme, but it's not the fast swipe that you're going to get. It's also a play side run. You're gonna hit that more, hit cutting into the A gap from a stretch. Whereas inside zone, you're aiming points the A gap with the thought of you're bending it backside. Yes. Chip Long used to have this expression. He would tell his backs, if you stay play side on an inside zone and you don't get 4 yards, I'm taking you out. Like this play is designed to be a backside cut, not a front. So if you go front side, you better give me 4 yards. If not, I'm taking you out. Because that's kind of where it comes from. So yeah, anything to add, Ryan, on any of that stuff?
No, I think you hit it.
Okay, good question, man. I love stuff like that. Irish blooded. Here we go. Let's get back.
Said, other than Marcus Freeman, coach on the Notre Dame football staff, you would most want to sit and talk football with. Interesting one. I almost feel like it's a guy that is new to the staff that I just kind of want to get to know. Like I don't know Joe Rudolph much, like I know his past, but I would love to talk ball with him. And offensive line coaches always have that personality where like they want to talk ball, you know what I mean? Like they just want to sit down and diagram stuff and really talk ball, you know what I mean? Yeah. So he'd probably be one for me, I think.
Yeah, I love talking ball with offensive line coaches, man. I really do.
Yeah,
I really do. And then being a coordinator, he could talk a little bit like Joe Rudolph. Like I love Harry Houston. I've been to 2 coaches clinics where Notre Dame, where I've just sit down and just listen to Harry Hiestand talk. And then I'd start engaging with him, talking ball with him a little bit. And just, I mean, he's an O-line guy, run game guy.
Yep.
Where Joe Rudolph, you could actually talk about pass game schemes and stuff with. I'm not talking about my favorite pass concepts with Harry Hiestand. I was like, no, just tell me how to block it. You know what I mean? And that's what's a little bit different about Coach Hiestand, in my opinion, about Coach Rudolph is he's got a little bit more of that to him. So that'd be fun to do. But honestly, I would love to sit down and talk with Al Golden. Because he's a really smart guy. He's a very personable guy. And as long as he's willing to allow me to ask him a couple tough questions about, well, don't you think this, or what about this? And, maybe allow, because we did I don't remember if he was part of that or not, but we did like this staff sit down with Bowling Green's coaches back when Tim Beckwin was there, and Virginia when Al Groh and his staff were there. And so we all kind of got together, and we actually met at Christopher Newport. It was kind of like where we all met. And that's where I was at the time. And we just talk ball, talk ideas, share concepts, share, how do you guys teach this? And it was kind of cool because I used to argue with my head coach all the time. Like, he was just worthless, but he would always teach 3-step drop a certain way. And I hated how he'd teach it. And so he looks at me, we're talking to Mike Groh, and he looks at me, he's like, well, let me ask you this. How do you guys teach 3-step drop? From shotgun. And he just kind of looks at me, and he's like, because he's thinking Mike Groh's going to, and then Mike Groh answers the question. He's like, I teach it this way. And I'm over here like this. Because Mike Groh's like, it's exactly what I taught, how I taught it, and would argue. And so I was like, yeah, okay, thank you very much. I couldn't say that because I didn't want to get fired.
Sure.
But I was like, oh, that's interesting. I just looked away. I was not going to make eye contact with my head coach at that point in time because I knew, me, Ryan, I would have been like, dumbass, what I mean? So I didn't want to get fired that day. Yes. So I didn't do that. But I mean, like that was a great staff, man. Like, the Virginia guys were great. We were talking ball. They didn't want to go into Division III guys, And I've always told you, Al Golden, when I was ever around him, was always just a really nice, personable guy. I'd love to be able to talk ball with him. I would. I just would want to say, look, this is me and you talking here. Right? Let me ask you some tougher questions. Explain to me why you're choosing to do this and why it's not better to do it this way.
Yeah.
But I'd also still want to learn, like, oh, okay. Like, dude, you coached in the NFL for 6 years. Like,
it's got a lot of experience.
Let's talk ball, man.
Yeah.
So that's probably who it would be for me. Honestly, it would be Al Golden. If we're just talking one-on-one, heck yeah, that'd be a good conversation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Chancey Stuckey be another interesting one because I wouldn't just want to talk ball with him. He's got a very interesting background, doesn't he, Brian? It's like high school quarterback, Clemson, NFL, was a pastor out in California for a little bit. Like, he's got a very interesting background, man. He'd just be an interesting interview, I think, more than anything.
He's a very energetic guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. He'd be a good one. Dylan McCullough also, but he's got a very interesting history and story as well.
He's got.
There's a lot of good guys in the staff, man. There's a lot of good dudes that I'd like to talk ball with. There's no doubt. There's a couple I wouldn't, but a couple that I would, no doubt. All right, here we go from J.P. Buellsfeld.
What's up, JP? Said Jerome Tang only had 2 scholarship players when he became Kansas State basketball coach 1 year ago. Now in the Elite 8 through transfer portal. Do you agree this cannot happen at Notre Dame because of the undergraduate transfer rules?
I don't necessarily think so. Notre Dame has gotten transfers with multiple years of eligibility left. That's the thing now, is you can get a transfer and a grad transfer and still have 2 years to play. Do I think they can do it? Yes, I think they can do it. Look, here's the thing with Notre Dame. It's very simple. You got to go grad transfers or freshmen. That's what you got to do. Notre Dame can get freshmen as transfers as long as they took legitimate courses. Because here's the problem. Notre Dame will not accept classes towards degrees if it's not like an identical situation to what they have. And it's silly and stupid, and I get all that. Freshmen don't have that problem because it's not that they reject the courses outright. They just won't put it towards they'll accept all your classes, but they're just all gen eds. They just get all put towards gen eds. Well, now you got a million gen ed, not gen ed, but not general education, like that's your degree, but what's the word I'm looking for, Ryan? The stuff that you take
requisites?
That's not part of your
requisites. just like requisites.
No,
right?
like
no.
When you grad, you got to take your stuff for your major, and then you got to take the other like gen eds type of stuff, right? That doesn't necessarily go towards your major. I can't believe I'm like completely drawing a blank on the word I'm trying to find here right now. But anyway, the point is those things will all get accepted. They just won't go towards your degree track. They just get the gen ed requirements is basically what they go towards. And electives. There it is. Electives. They're all towards electives. Thank you, Josh. And so they're not part of your core track. Well, with a freshman, it doesn't matter because he's hardly taking any classes like that. So if a freshman, like if Notre Dame misses out on a kid who's got good grades, as long as he goes to a school and gets decent grades, they can get him in, because if they just send all of his classes to electives, fine. You got your electives taken care of in your first year. So that would help them. They can do the freshman thing. They just can't get a junior. But here's the thing. Most juniors are graduating now. You know what I mean? And so it's like there's just this weird middle ground with Notre Dame that's hard to get. But like some of the transfers the football team missed on this year, it wasn't because they couldn't get him into school. It just missed. It's got out recruited. Yeah. Like the kid from Western Michigan, it's got out recruited.
Braden Fisk.
You know, so that's the thing for me is that's where I look at it and say, I don't think the transfer portal should be limiting to Notre Dame, because a lot of kids are transferring in 3 years with their degrees, and they've got 2 years left of basketball. Trey Wirtz is like that. Cormac's got 3 flipping years. You know what I mean? So it's like, now that was COVID related. Most kids aren't going to have that, but Trey Wirtz had 2 years of eligibility left. They have gotten kids like that in there for basketball. That shouldn't be limiting. I don't think the transfer portal issues are going to be as limiting for basketball as they are for football, in my opinion. That's just my 2 cents. That's really what it boils down to. So I hope that answers the question, Ryan. Do you have a thought on that? Do you happen to agree with that? Or
I mean, I think in college basketball, it's such a different it's a different landscape altogether, because we're talking about in a basketball landscape where 1 year in college, you guys can enter the NBA draft, right? So if a guy is going back to school in general, I think that landscape usually tells me that they probably generally care more about like the long-term and kind of the academic side than like a football perspective, right? Because a football player, he might transfer, right? But like he has to stay in school 3 years. Like that's a requirement. Mm-hmm. You can't just leave after 1 year. So if a basketball player is going back for multiple years, that tells me that they're probably have their perspective is not just NBA or bust at that point, right? It's like, let's get to a good situation, good academics, like that type of stuff. So I do think that Notre Dame can sell transfer portal basketball-wise better than they can consistently in the football side of things.
Here's the thing that a lot of people are missing on this portal thing. There's 2 ways to look at the portal. One is, hey, we got to be like everybody else. Transfer portal. Here's the deal. These are limited scholarship numbers on teams. So if teams are taking a ton of portal kids, guess what they're not taking? High school kids.
Yeah.
Notre Dame needs to always be a high school-driven program that fills needs with transfer portal kids. Women's basketball team has mastered that beautifully. Coach Ivy's done that a beautiful job. She's recruiting guards, just guards. And then she looks for the portal for solid bigs. And she's now done it a couple years in a row. She got the girl from Stanford last year that had a really good year. This year, Lauren Ebo has been incredibly valuable to this basketball team. Kylie Watson has been good too. Kylie's got 2 years left, actually. Sean Stars is telling me. But Lauren Ebo, I mean, they're not the same team without them. So go get those grad transfers. But what's the heart and soul of their team? It's Sonia Citron. It's Olivia Miles. It's Maddie Westbeld. Girls that they got. KK Bransford, who's a freshman. They're all girls that they got out of high school. And they just now signed a top 5 recruiting class with 3 5-stars, Hannah Hidalgo, Emma Risch, and, of course, Cass Prosper, who's been a great addition to this team with all the injuries. She kind of graduated early and joined the team in the second semester. And then balance that with a couple transfers with bigs and all that kind of stuff. I would like to see them actually kind of start recruiting some bigs if they can.
Yeah.
But she was able to use the transfer portal to kind of get some veteran bigs with her star young guards, and it's been a pretty good mesh, right? Dara Mabry was an undergrad transfer, so they've been able to get them. It's just a little harder to do. But they got Dara when she was still pretty young, and could still have plenty of time at Notre Dame to get her degree back on track, because they're not going to take someone who's not on pace to graduate. That's the problem,
right?
And so that's that's obviously a big red flag for me. So I think they can do it. I think it's a great point, JP. I think they can do it, but I would rather him say, hey, I'm not worried about building to make a tournament run next year. Our roster's a mess. And so I'll bring some transfers as long as those kids have multiple years to play. What I would like to see Notre Dame do is, hey, there's some top 50 to 100 kids that we otherwise weren't going to get because they were going to go to Duke or NC State or whatever that are now there for us to get because those teams are not giving as many scholarships out to high school kids.
Yeah.
That's where I think Notre Dame should get that 85 to 100 kid that may not be a star as a freshman, but that's okay. They will be in a couple years. I think that's still where Notre Dame needs to be, Ryan. And if you can get some graduates to help you get there faster, great. But I just don't think the goal should be, what do we got to do to go be an Elite Eight team next year? You need to get back on track and rebuild this roster. And I think the best way to do that is still through high school, a mix of predominant high school and then fill some needs here and there with graduates. I think that's the way to go.
And you can tell some high schoolers that they're definitely going to get playing time since the roster's a little barren right now, right? Like there's some immediate opportunities for contributions as well. So it's going to be interesting, man. It's going to be
like
really
Penn State's top signee just asked out of his letter of intent with Penn State. Be curious. Like that's the kind of guys that I would go after as opposed to a million transfers.
Clearly a relationship there, right? So
right.
Yeah.
Here we go. Let's get to some more, Ryan. Let's try to work through as many as we can here.
Vanilla Chill said, could you see Deion Colzie being Hartman's, assuming he's quarterback one, go-to red zone target this season? I could easily see Colzie being a guy that could snatch up 10-plus touchdowns. I mean, yes, he could be. Yeah, I mean, I think the Vanilla Chill, it's such an interesting roster for Notre Dame as pass catchers this year because there are several guys that you could convince me are that guy, right? Like if you told me Tobias Merriweather was that guy, I'd be like, cool. If you told me that Deion Colzie was that guy, I'd be like, yup. If you told me Mitchell Evans was that guy, I'd be like, cool, get that. If you told me Jaden Thomas working in the slot in the red zone against a safety is that type of guy as well, I think you have a lot of options to be that potential red zone weapon. So yeah, it could Deion Colzie be that guy? For sure. Yeah. But I think that you have a lot of options on your roster, which is really fun.
Yep, absolutely. Ryan, I'm going to ask this one because it's for you. It's from John A1. He says, Ryan, which team drafting in the top 10 do you believe provides the best situation for a rookie quarterback?
It's a great question. In the top 10, so the teams that are in top 10 that are need of a quarterback, Carolina Panthers, Houston Texans, Indianapolis Colts, maybe Atlanta Falcons, Las Vegas Raiders. Out of those teams, I think it might be Carolina, Brian, but like you can convince me on Indianapolis as well. Like Indianapolis has building blocks up front and they have Michael Pittman Jr. Actually, I'm changing my mind. I'm changing my mind as literally as I'm talking about it. I was thinking Carolina for a second because Carolina does have a offensive line that really did take a step forward this year. So as a coach, you look at them and say like, they're going to be able to at least run the football and pass protect. But I think it's Indianapolis. It's because you have building blocks on the offensive line. You still have Quentin Nelson. You still have Braden Smith, who's a good football player. You have Michael Pittman Jr. at wide receiver, but you also have Jonathan Taylor, which you'll be able to lean on the running game. So I think Indianapolis Colts would probably be my team.
I want to, Ryan, we're going to put some on the board here a little bit, but Notre Dame released the times and the results for the players from today. I'm just going to give you a couple of them that stand out to me. Yep. Jason Adamiola weighed in at 6'3" and 6'3" and 280 pounds. He had 33.
He was only 280. He was only 280.
Yeah, 6'3" or 10 and 2/8 inch hands. Those are pretty big. 33 and 3/4. I'm going to screw with you, Ryan. 33 and 3/4 arm span and an 80-inch wingspan. Okay, which is I think pretty good. 25. He did 25 reps on the bench.
Good number.
And he had a 33-inch vertical. I think those are all pretty good numbers.
It's very good.
The 40 he ran 5:02 with a 1.67 10-yard split. He ran a 4.59 in the shuttle and a 7.6 in the 3-cone. So,
1.67 10-yard is actually very good because Isaiah Foskey ran a 1.66 for some comparison.
Yeah.
So
which is tracks with Jason. Really good initial burst.
Yep.
And Justin had 33 and 1/8 inch arms. He weighed in at 254 at a 32-inch vertical. He had a disappointing. He ran a 4.95 with a 1.610, which is good. And then his shuttle was 4.56 and a 7.47 in the three cone.
Not good.
Yeah. Bo Bauer did not test, but he did do 30 reps on the bench. 32-inch arms. He weighed in at 240. Tariq Bracy had a disappointing 40 time. He only ran a 4.54, which I expected a lot better than that from him. But he had a 1.55.10, so he didn't have a great start either time. But he did have a 38.5-inch vertical.
That's nice.
He measured in at 5'10 and 1/8, 31 and a quarter inch arms, 73.5-inch wingspan.
31 is actually a really good arm length for a nickel corner.
For a 5'10 guy.
Yeah. Very good.
And he had a 4.21 shuttle. Tariq did.
That's not great either.
Yeah. Nope. Especially for a guy his size. Avery Davis measured in at 5'10 6, 199. He ran a 4.56, which actually a 4.56 off a guy coming off of the injury he came off of is actually better than I kind of expected a little bit for him, but not as good as I think he would have done in peak physical condition. Isaiah Foskey measured in, Ryan. He was a 263.
Yep.
Measured a 263 and an 82 and an 1/8 inch wingspan.
Yep.
See, going down here, Brandon Joseph worked out. He did a 34.5-inch vertical. He had a 4.57 and a 4.62. He had a 1.57 10-yard split. He did have a good shuttle. He ran a 4.09 on the 20-yard shuttle and a 6.8 in a three cone.
That's really good.
Which is really good. Yeah.
But he improved his vertical by 4 inches from the combine. Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah. Remind me to tell you something about something weird that happened with him during the thing. Josh Lugg weighed in at 306. He did 31 and 3. He's the tallest short-armed guy I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Almost 6'7", 31 and 3/8-inch arms. 70. Yeah. He did have a 77 and 7/8-inch wingspan, which isn't great for a guy that's almost 6'7". 25.5-inch verts, okay, but he had a 5.7 and a 5.78 in the 40 with a 1.84 start, and he had a 4.83 three cone and a 8.18 on he had a 4.83 on the 20-yard shuttle and an 8.18 on the three cone, which is not good.
Yeah.
And then Jarrett Patterson had a 4.73 on the shuttle and then a 7.68 on the three cone with 31 and an 1/8-inch arm length. Even today I'm looking, I'm like, dude, those just do not look like short arms to me. Like, it's so weird. Like, I'm looking right. I'm like, those do not look like 31-inch arms. But
did you have a did you know did they have a wingspan for Jared? It might just be
76 and 3/4.
Yeah. Okay, it's not that great either.
No, it's not. And he weighed in at 307. Now, he's got big hands, 10 and 2/8. Chris Smith, I thought, had a day. He measured in at 6'1", 6'12", 302 pounds, 31 and a quarter inch arms, which is not great, 76 and a quarter inch wingspan. He did 37 reps on the bench. He had a 31-inch vertical jump.
It's really nice.
He ran a 5.09 and a 5.04. And I'll tell you, it was a clean 40 time. You know what I mean? Like, whatever the time was, you can watch a guy like it was a clean 40 time for a 302-pounder. He had a 4.53 in the shuttle. And his 10-yard start was 1.71, which is not bad for a guy over 300 pounds.
No.
And then his three cone was 7.27.
That's absurd.
For a 7.27. Sean and I looked at each other. We were like, dude, that guy was moving. And I said, you can ask Sean Davis. I said, dude, he looked a lot quicker on that three cone than Jason Adamiola did. He looked good to me, Ryan. 7.27 for a 302-pound guy with short legs is really good.
He's going to be in a camp. He'll be in a camp with
30 and 37 reps on the bench.
Yep.
Like, that's good. That's really good.
If you're going to have shorter arms, you better be benching, man. Yes. And he benches. Yeah.
And his arms were like massive. Like he helped himself. 31-inch vertical and a 9-foot broad. So
it's all really good numbers, actually.
And a 5.04 for a nose tackle, 300-pound nose tackle. He had a day.
He's going to be.
Those
be in a
movement
camp.
Numbers did not shock me at all when I watched him. And Sean Davis and I were talking about. I was like, dude, he is clean athletically.
Yeah.
Like really smooth. So yeah, that was big. That was really big. So I just wanted to throw some of those numbers out to you and get your stances on that.
Chris Smith will be in a camp just based upon that testing.
Yeah. And he had good film this year too, Ryan. Especially after the first couple games, he wasn't great, but as he got more comfortable being at Notre Dame, he He had a very good season. Very
Yeah.
good season. He really did. Let's get back to some questions here, Ryan. Here we go. Here's one from Christopher Crosby.
Christopher's question is, okay, last one for me. The safety room is pretty thin. If they don't move Clarence Lewis, is it going to force them to play Ben Minich or Don Schuler if he's healthy enough?
I think it's going to more so force them to have to play Thomas Harper there, which is, to me, not
Yeah.
ideal. I think it's going to force them to play him there. And that's just not where I want to be. I don't understand their unwillingness to move Clarence Lewis. I really don't. I do not understand that at all. You're pretty good at corner right now. I don't get that. I really don't get it. And he can still play slot from safety. That's the thing. It's like, you don't have to, if he's not playing outside corner, he's playing safety and slot. That's okay.
That's actually a really easy cross train to be a safety nickel. Like, it's a really easy cross train.
The guy you just recruited from Oklahoma State's a safety nickel.
Yeah.
And, so I don't understand that. I don't understand that.
From We Are Not Marshall, wide receiver has 10 plus touchdown receptions this year. That means the offense was explosive. It got tiring last year with having to dissect the defense on every play instead of simple pitch and catch plays.
So yeah, I mean, if a guy has 10 it means the offense is explosive. Not necessarily. I mean, if a guy's just getting to relate to the earlier question, if a guy's just getting a bunch of red zone touches, I mean, look, Michael Mayer had almost 10 touchdown receptions this year, right?
Yeah.
They have like 9. And I think their offense was far from explosive. So, he had 9 touchdown catches this year at the tight end positions. I just think it means you have somebody who's a really good red zone weapon. Now, if you were to tell me that Lorenzo Styles has 10 touchdown receptions or Tobias has 10 touchdown receptions, that most likely means that they were making explosive plays. If Braylon James ever has 10 touchdown receptions in his career, it means he's explosive, right?
Yeah.
So it just depends on the player. If Deion has 10, I mean, Deion could average 12 yards a catch and have 10 touchdowns.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think it would be more than 12, but you get the point, right? Like, just a bunch of red zone touchdowns.
Yeah. I mean, but to your point about like if it's Braylon James at some point, it's like that probably averaged like 30 yards per touchdown reception, right?
Like Will Fuller, a lot like Will Fuller.
Yeah.
I mean, Will Fuller didn't have a lot of 3-yard touchdown fade catches in his career, like Michael Floyd had. You know what I mean? So in 2011, so it just depends on the player. It depends on the player. Touchdowns are not necessarily the thing that I would say. Give me this number, and I can tell you that you're good. You tell me that of the 5 receivers in the rotation, three or 4 of them averaged over 15 yards a catch. Yes. Okay. That you were a pretty explosive offense this year. No doubt.
Yep.
Right. That would tell me a lot more than touchdown catches. We got a super chat here that I'm going to read, Ryan, because it's draft related. This is from Tyler Evans. So the top 4 quarterbacks in this draft, which one needed to show out more in their pro day? Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, CJ Stroud, or Bryce Young? I know my opinion on this.
I guess Bryce Young, since he didn't do anything at the combine, like you saw some from the other spots. So like, I guess that's the answer, but I don't really put that much stock in the pro days. I would have liked to see improvements from both Will Levis and Anthony Richardson as far as throwing at the pro days, but I think the answer ends up being Bryce Young just because you didn't see him do anything at the combine. So he's the one that you had, I don't want to say question marks with, but like, it's just an unknown as far as what it looked like type of thing.
Here's my thing, Ryan. I say the answer is Anthony Richardson. And the reason I'll say that is because for all the talk about how great he was at the combine, he tested great. I didn't think he threw great. I think if he could put together a good throwing day, teams are dying. They're looking for any excuse to fall in love with Anthony Richardson as a quarterback because the God-given tools are immense. So I think if he went out and put on like a passing clinic the way that CJ Stroud did, I think that would move teams more than anybody. I want to say Will Levis if we're being rational, but it doesn't matter how bad that guy looks, man. There's just some NFL people that just love that guy. Like part of me wants to say Will Levis because I think he's the worst thrower of the football of all those guys in this conversation by a mile. But Bryce Young can simply say, look at my tape. Look at my tape. CJ could do that to a degree too. I think CJ answered some questions about his arm strength in the pro day yesterday. And at the combine. That's the only questions I had on CJ Stroud if I'm an NFL scout is this guy doesn't throw the ball down the field a whole lot. Can he really throw it down the field? Because they don't ask him to throw the ball deep a lot. You know that, Ryan. It's one big knock on Ryan Day's offense for quarterbacks. I thought CJ threw the really good deep balls at the combine. I thought he threw some really pretty deep balls, just showed me a lot of arm power. to get the ball down the field. Would you say that that's accurate? I mean, that's one thing he needed to show. Bryce throws some really good, a lot of deep balls or a lot more deep balls at Alabama, I felt anyway.
Yeah.
But we know Richardson and Levis can throw the deep ball. They just have no touch and no feel, especially Levis. Because, again, Levis is like a 5th or 6th year guy, where Anthony Richardson is still young. Richardson, CJ, and Bryce Young are all really still really young guys.
Yep.
I don't get this infatuation with Will Levis. He's a 5th year guy. He was a 2018 guy. I just don't get the infatuation with him. He wasn't even that. Never threw for 3,000 yards in college. Got beat out by Sean Clifford. Even though they don't throw the ball very much, he's been over 10 interceptions in each of the last 2 years. I don't get it, man. I don't have a clue where the will. I mean, I know what you're going to say, and I don't.
Well, no, I was going to. I wasn't going to go with the tall white thing for a second. There's a lot of reports that like coaches love him. He's a smart kid, like that type of stuff too. So, like,
isn't that why people drafted Christian Ponder? Right?
Yeah.
I don't care if he's all those things. Can he throw or not? You know, that's the thing for me. Like, I've heard people make mentions about, Sam Hartman throws too many interceptions or whatever. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. You know, there's reasons for it, but I'm like, did you watch Will Levis the last 2 years? I mean, Will Levis has thrown 23 interceptions the last 2 years, Ryan, on, let me see here. It's 353 plus 283. So Will Levis threw 23 interceptions on 636 throws. That is not a good interception ratio. Sam Hartman threw like 26 interceptions on something over 900 attempts the last 2 years. It's like, I just do not understand the Will Levis infatuation.
My favorite falsity about Will Levis is that he didn't play with any talent at Kentucky, which always makes me laugh. I'm like, Wan'Dale Robinson just went in the 2nd round. Chris Rodriguez ran for 1,000 yards like 3 straight years, but he didn't play with any talent. You're right.
Sure.
You're right.
And who was that kid they had? Wan'Dale, wasn't there another kid? Or no, that guy was before Levis got there.
They had another solid receiver that came out last year, I think, too. I can't remember what his name was.
They had a kid a couple years ago, but the kid that played ended up moving to quarterback, but he was gone before Will Levis got there.
Oh, you're talking about
the Bowden kid,
Lynn Bowden.
The Bowden kid. Yeah. But they had another kid, but that was Jeff Badgett, is who I was thinking of. Badette, but he was there way before Will Levis was there. So that was the other guy I was looking at.
Oklahoma transfer.
Wan'Dale Robinson had 104 catches for 1,348 yards.
And he was a 2nd round draft pick by the Giants. So,
and Barian Brown this year as a freshman, I loved that kid's film coming out of high school.
He had a good year, I think, as a freshman.
Yes, the 50 catches for 628 yards. I mean, that guy was a good football player coming out of high school. So I don't get where some of these people, I mean, I graded him as a 4-star kid coming out. So don't talk to me about they didn't have players. Get out of here with that stuff. That's ridiculous. All right, let's get to some more here, Ryan. We got another super chat.
From Mark 1, it says, "Hi, guys. I know off topic I had asked in a previous podcast about the quarterback transfer fitting in. Now time has passed. What you think?"
I mean, for what we know now, 2 practices in, I think he's fit in just fine. I mean, he relates well with the players in the room. He hasn't been a jerk. I mean, we were doing interviews and Sam's over there, is looking down and you could just tell he doesn't want to be there. And that's okay. I don't like talking to the media either. But then he walks out and you just see a different, and he starts like making some little comments to Kenny Minchie and Kenny laughs. I mean, you could just tell that there's a relationship there already. Yeah. And what you don't want is some guy that comes in and he's like, I'm here to do my thing. And that Sam has come in as a teammate, and a guy that wants to compete. And I think that's something that's, from what I've been told, has really ingratiated himself with his teammates. Is that guy's not coming here big time in anybody. Hey, I'm the 19th all-time leading passer in college football history, which he is. Sam Hartman is top 20 all-time in college football for passing yards and passing touchdowns.
Yep.
And he could act a certain way, but he hasn't, from what I'm told. And that's a great thing.
I think this is more of like the less you hear, the better type of conversation. Honestly, it's like just seamless transitions is what you're looking for this type of conversation.
Yeah.
Because it is tough. I mean, I think it is tough. I mean, we don't talk about this, but like, it's not easy being a grad transfer for 1 year and assimilating yourself, especially a quarterback, man. Like, you're the leader, like it's not easy, but I think Sam will be just fine. We have no reason to think that he won't.
Yeah. Let's get to here's another draft one here, Ryan.
From
So
Bailey. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I shall read it for you, my friend. Let me set you up every now and then. Bailey Brad says, if Michael Mayer ends up falling in the draft, is there an argument that Mayer should have come back for another year? I'm very curious to hear your opinion on this. Okay, you have the same answer I do. Explain, Ryan.
Because Michael Mayer, if he's going to fall this year, he's going to fall next year. It has nothing to do with physical traits. It's people overthinking.
Yeah. Whatever they're going to pick apart about him now is not going to be any different next year.
Yeah, exactly. It has nothing to do with his route running. It has nothing to do with his hand strength, ability to play through contact. None of that. People are overlooking him because he doesn't have the longest arms in the world, and he's not the most vertically explosive athlete of all time. Like, those are the knocks against him, and that would be the same.
I still think he's faster than people think.
Yeah, and he ran 4.7 flat. It's a good number. It's a good number.
We've seen games where he can stretch the seams. But he's a throwback. I think the arm length is something that's a concern, and we saw that a little bit today. There's a couple balls that were just slightly out of his catch radius, and I get that. But sometimes you can overthink it and say, who's your quarterback? You know, if your quarterback's a veteran guy with good accuracy, then he's going to love a guy like Michael Mayer. Yeah, so whatever they're overthinking this year, they were going to overthink next year. And because Michael Mayer's not getting any better next year. I mean, he can refine his technique a little bit better and maybe put a whole year of good blocking on film. But and next year's tight end class isn't going to be. I mean, there's a legit argument for someone to be better than him in next year's draft class. Yep. There isn't one in this year's draft class, but yet some people are still making it. Like, you know, so it would have still happened. It would have still happened. All right, here we go, Ryan.
Next question is from Vanilla Chill. Said, when a player like CJ Carr is recruiting players to also come to Notre Dame, does the staff tell him who they might want him to recruit, or Carr gives names to the staff, or who could be a good fit as well?
I'm not sure how I'm allowed to answer this question, Ryan, because I'm not sure what the rules are. All I will say is that CJ Carr has a pretty good idea of who Notre Dame is recruiting.
Yes.
And I'll just leave it at that because I'm not quite sure what the rules are on that. So just leave it at that. Man. There's never a question about him knowing who they're recruiting.
Yeah.
So there we go.
From Abent in Notre Dame, Notre Dame. Current best guesses at the wide receiver defensive line classes. Thanks for attempting. So we're talking 2024. It
is so. I mean, how does Logan Thomas's visit go this weekend? There's so much I got to know before I'm ready to go there. The only thing that I'm comfortable saying right now is that I'm pretty confident that Bryce Young's going to end up at Notre Dame. After that, I don't have a clue. It's way too early for that. I mean, we haven't even started spring visits yet. Those don't really start till tomorrow. Yeah. So it's so early for that. It is way too early for that. Wide receiver, same thing, because there's so many kids on the board, Ryan. Like we got to get these two no matter what. There's like 7 or 8 guys that they're like, give me any of those 2 and we're going to be happy. And that includes Isaiah Canyon, for example, from Georgia, is a guy that I know this Notre Dame staff loves. Ryan Wingo, Jeremiah McClellan, Quasi Gilmer, Micah Gilbert. Josiah Brown. I mean, there's a lot of guys on the board. I don't know which 2 are going to end up coming to Notre Dame. I really don't. It's early yet. I think it's a really I don't know if there's a lot of truly elite receivers, Ryan, like we've seen in past years. It's not like the 08 class where I had like 7 5-star guys in my view, but it's a really deep year receiver. I mean, there's a lot of good receivers out there. And so and that's just going to be happening more and more and more, Ryan. Just more kids want to play receiver, and more teams are playing 3 and 4 receiver offenses in high school. And it's always going to be deep.
If I'm a parent of some of these kids, man, I'm like, hey, man, you could be a real good receiver at the next level, or you could be an elite quarterback, though.
Bingo.
Like, I would.
Bingo.
Yeah. I told you the JC Horn thing, right? Where JC was a big time wide receiver coming out of high school. It was his dad, Joe Horn, who was like, no, JC, you need to go play corner, dude, because there's a lot of you at wide receiver in college football and in the NFL. There's not a lot of guys that play like you and look like you at cornerback in the NFL. And that's kind of where the difference is.
Yep, absolutely agree with that. And for me, at receiver, if you can take 4, that's fine. I'm good with 3 because, Ryan, you just signed 4 last year. All your kids you don't have a receiver on your roster that's out of eligibility after this year. Not one, except for Matt Salerno.
Yep.
Right. So I don't want to start loading up too much because then you run the risk of losing some of these guys. And also, I want to load up now. I want Taylor. I mean, there's some dudes on the board for next year. I start giving me 3 a year every year, and I think that's a much more comfortable place to be.
Yeah. Now that you've regulated the board a little bit as far as the roster, and you start to actually have numbers that make sense, you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Here's an interesting one I want to ask you, Ryan. USMA 87 asks, which current Notre Dame quarterback has the highest probability of starting in the NFL? I want to get your answer. I have a twofold answer for that, but I want to get your thoughts on that. Do you want me to answer it first while you think about it?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's twofold answers. Highest probability right now today, it's Sam Hartman because he's the most experienced and we know the most about him. Yep. If it's just based on talent, right? So take experience out of it, then it's Kenny Minchie, in my opinion, actually.
That's what I think
that's of all the guys on the roster right now, because again, I'm not counting CJ Carr, because CJ Carr is currently not on the roster. Right. If you want to including guys that are committed to Notre Dame, it's CJ. CJ is the most, to me, natural God-given talent of all the quarterbacks currently on the team or down the road. The reason I didn't go with Tyler Buckner is because, again, as we mentioned, Tyler has a lot more mechanical work that is needed before he's ready to be in that conversation. Tyler has the highest upside as a college quarterback of all of them, in my opinion. I think Kenny has better pro tools, in my view, than Tyler does. That's just my 2 cents.
Kenny was my initial one. And I mean, because the thing about Sam Hartman is that I think Sam Hartman's going to be in the NFL, but I think there's a question of like, is he just a backup? Is he a guy that's going to start games? Like, that's kind of where my questions come from. But I think Kenny Minchie does have kind of that profile where you just say, like, again, man, we're talking about a kid is a true freshman in his first ever spring. But like long term, you look at him and say, like, you know, he's probably going to be 6'2", 220 plus pounds. He throws a good ball. He's got kind of the best combination, I think, of size,
frame,
exactly, size, arm strength, solid athlete,
like wicked smart. Like Kenny is. Anyone that's been around him for 5 minutes say that kid is a wicked smart when it comes to football.
Agree.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. All right. Let's get to some more here, Ryan. I'll ask this one. This is an NFL question. How do you like the Irish in the NFL, like Drew Tranquill to the Chiefs, Julian Love to the Seahawks, and Mike McGlinchey to the Broncos? Hope they kill it. I know one that I'm rooting the hardest for is Mike McGlinchey with the Broncos.
I mean,
their offensive line has been their right tackle situation has been awful for years. Ever
since the whole Jawan James thing a few years ago kind of fell flat in their face.
Ever since Ryan Harris retired. I mean, that's because he was solid in his couple years back with the Broncos. But yeah, the Jawan James thing was weird. It's been a jinx position ever since. You're absolutely right, Ryan.
So it regulates it a little bit. I still think Mike has a lot of improvement that he needs to make, man. But like he is a better option to what right tackle has been at Denver, the immediate that he lands there, right? Like immediacy. Julian Love to the Seahawks, I think, is a really nice fit, man. I think that they asked their safeties to do a little bit of everything, and I think Julian can do a little bit of everything. And they got him on a really team-friendly deal, man. Yeah. Like, they did not have to give him a lot of money.
Average is $6 million a year. That surprised me.
After 100-something tackles, a couple interceptions, played really well. So I think that the Love fit, though, schematically into Seattle system is really nice. Drew Tranquill to the Chiefs. Look, I think that Drew could be a really good player for the Chiefs. I just didn't think that the Chiefs needed Drew Tranquill, if that makes sense. Like, they have talented linebackers already. I think Drew, I'm interested to see how they use Drew. Like, is Drew a full-time starter? Is he a guy that's rotating in? Like, it's very odd fits for me, but I think Drew will do a good job for what he's asked to. He just had quietly a good season for the Chargers. So, yeah.
Dude, I completely forgot when we were talking about receivers, Jason Robinson. I completely forgot about Jason Robinson. That's another one on the board. And he'd probably be in my top 2 or 3 of most likely as of right now.
I agree with that one.
Receiver. Yeah. He'd probably be there for me. But yeah, it's there. But yeah, I hope they all do it. Drew Tranquill, great kid. Julian Love, really like Julian. McGlinchey obviously is the one I'm rooting for the most because that's selfish. The Broncos can just have a solid right tackle. Their offensive line is going to be a lot better.
Yeah.
I like the Ben Powers move even as much, if not better, than the McGlinchey one, just for me personally. But their center still stinks right now. So we'll see how.
How dare you insult Lloyd Cushenberry like that, man?
Here's an interesting one from John A1, Ryan.
Said, in terms of talent, is there a position group that lacks the potential to compete for a championship in 2023?
Potential, I would say no. The closest that I would say right now, Ryan, to that would probably be safety. for me.
Yeah.
Safeties, because there's a ton of potential on the linebacker core. There's a ton of potential on the defensive line. Ton of potential at cornerback. Although I'd say cornerbacks, receiver, running back, tight end. I mean, they're all positions with potential to be outstanding.
Offensive line,
all of them. Yes,
yeah.
all of them. I'd say the biggest question mark I have is because Don Shula and Ben Minich are good players. There's no cornerback, you have potential stars. Linebacker, you have potential stars. D-line, you have potential stars. Tight end, you have potential stars. Receiver, you have potential stars. Running back, quarterback, offensive line, all of them. Safety, I don't see a potential star, especially now that Brandon Hillman's not there. I don't see a potential star. I don't. Xavier Watts is the closest thing to it, but he's going to be a senior this year.
Yeah.
I love a Don Shula and Ben Minich as good football players. Jalen Elliott types. And I can have a good secondary with Jalen Elliott types. But you're not going to be a championship team because of that position group. It just won't limit you from being a championship team, is what I would say.
You need other stuff around it to be very good in order for that to be a championship level one. I agree there. I agree.
Yeah. Safety. Can I say place kicker? Can I say that one?
Hey, man.
A little bit.
Let's see what Spencer Schrader's got in the leg, man. Let's see what he's got.
They haven't put him on the roster yet. So
I know. Well,
I got to figure that one out. Here's another one, Ryan. This is an interesting one, too. I like this one.
And from Zaremba, would you consider replacing Stanford with a Texas and Florida team rotation, such as a UCF or TCU? I'm saying this to establish a possible pipeline in Florida and strengthen a pipeline in Texas.
I could not care less about trying to establish a pipeline in Florida because it's never going to happen. Florida is just not a place that's going to be consistently good for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Texas, sure. I would look at that. I don't know if TCU is that answer. I don't know if that's the route to go. I don't know if playing TCU is going to – what I would say, Ryan, is I would care more about having more Shamrock Series games in that region. Play more Shamrock Series games in Arlington Heights, right, in the Dallas area, But, yeah, I'd schedule home and home with TCU. Sure. I just don't – they're going to play Texas A&M soon. Love that one. Because if you can go down there and beat them at their place on Kyle Field, man, that's wonderful. It's great. Yeah. Play in Texas. Those are options. Play Baylor. I'd have it home and home with Baylor. I'd be all about that. I'd be totally fine with a home and home with Baylor. So Texas, I care a lot more about. But I also wouldn't give up on the Pac-12 too either, Zaremba. I think you can do both, right? I like the notion of doing things to establish a Texas pipeline, but I think you can do things where maybe you play a West Coast team in Dallas in a one-off. Hey, we're going to play UCLA in a Shamrock Series game in Dallas, right? That'd be cool. I'd love to see that. And so I think that'd be a lot of fun. I would that's another way of doing it, but I kind of like the notion of having some Pac-12 teams on there too. So, if you're going to get rid of Stanford, play a Washington, play a UCLA, play the Arizona schools. Because to me, I think Texas and Arizona are two areas where I want to establish pipelines. No question. Because Arizona, Ryan, you and I have talked about, that is a ascending state. A lot of that California talent is now in Arizona. And there's some Texas talent moving out to Arizona as well. So Arizona and Texas I care a lot more about. But I don't want to completely give up on the Pac-12 because it's not always just about scheduling for pipelines. Right. Sometimes it's about I want to play a team from all over, and I still like the idea of having a Pac-12 team on your schedule. Now, if the Pac-12 goes away, you still have USC, but I wouldn't mind seeing those two conferences be part of rotation because, like I said, Ryan, and I said this I think when you left, sometimes I would like to play Washington in Dallas.
Yep.
Play UCLA in Dallas. That'd be so. Now you're getting both of it in a sort of a Shamrock thing. I think that'd be cool too. So, But Texas and Arizona, I care. Those are the two states more than any other that I say schedule games to try to create a pipeline. I think those two states can be great for Notre Dame.
Arizona's one that we don't talk about enough, man. Like Notre Dame needs to get into Arizona over the next couple of years. There's talent coming out, man. Like I know you feel good about like Kennedy Urlacher, but like Elijah Rushing this year. There's
Jeremiah Newcomb.
Yeah,
good football player.
Jeremiah Newcomb's a really good football player. There's a couple corners that we know that they were out to see on the trail that they didn't even offer, where you're just like, that's a good player, man. Like, that's a good football player. So, Arizona's a spot that they need to start getting some traction in, right? Just some.
Yep, I agree. I agree. So, good questions, Zaremba. I mean, Yeah, good question there. Very good question. Here is a super chat from Tyler Evans.
And his question, thank you, Tyler. Is there a coaching hire that you can think of that set a program back big time? There's a lot of them, I would
Ryan
think.
Van Gorder.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one
For Notre Dame fans. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's definitely
yeah.
one.
I mean, there you could go down. I mean, we could do this all day. But yeah, I mean, it's happened to a lot of places.
I mean, you could do just Notre Dame history if you want, right? Like, can we do like Tyron Willingham and like,
Bob Davie?
Yeah,
I mean, replacing Lou Holtz with Bob Davie instead of Barry Alvarez, huge mistake. Huge mistake.
Yeah.
Ty Willingham, I don't fault Notre Dame for that one because they had already found the guy they thought was going to be good for them, and he had that whole fiasco with George O'Leary.
Yeah,
they chose Bob Davie. That was a dumb. And I actually understood. Charlie Weiss didn't pan out, but I completely got that one. It made a lot of sense. You'd been turned down by Urban and some other people. Why not make a run at Charlie? He was a hot name, was a coordinator, was an alum. Had East Coast ties. I mean, I understood that one. It just didn't work out. In some areas, it didn't work out.
Who was the coach for Tennessee after Phil Fulmer?
Derek Dooley.
Derek Dooley is a bad one.
And then they followed up with Butch Jones. Yeah. That set them back in a big way.
For like 10 years. Set them back like a long time.
In a big way. It really did. The guy, Jim McElwain at Florida, was a bad hire. I thought that was a bad one. USC had a bunch in the 80s. A bunch of bad hires in the 80s that set that program back, and they never were the same until Pete came along. And like, what was it, like 99? I think is like they were a mediocre program for a long time. They hired the guy from the Smith guy, Larry Smith, right from Missouri. Hired like Ted Tollner. He was a mediocre coach. So yeah, we've seen and there's been assistant coaching hires that have like Dan Mullen's unwillingness to get rid of Todd Grantham is what played a big role in what did him in my opinion. Brian Van Gorder, I think Brian Kelly's career would have turned out way different if he was more willing to fire coaches. I'm serious. Like if he would have been more willing to get rid of Longo and Van Gorder after 2014 and brought in a Mike, I still say this, I'll take this to my grave, everybody. If Notre Dame had a legitimate strength coach and a legitimate D coordinator in 2015, they could have won a championship. Flat out. That team, even with the injuries, Deshaun Kaiser could have freaking beat Jacob Coker. With Will Fuller and CJ Prosise and an elite offensive line, they had like 9 dudes on that defense in 2009 were NFL players, including the best linebacker, the most explosive athlete pound for pound. You could argue that in 2015, Notre Dame had the 2 most explosive pound for pound athletes in college football, Will Fuller and Jalen Smith. And they had a bunch of NFL guys on both lines. They were wasted by a bad strength program and a terrible defensive coordinator. And so if Brian Kelly would have made the right move after 2014, which Saban would have done, which Urban would have done, then I think Kelly could have a ring right now. I really believe that. Because look, they almost beat Clemson with all those dudes, and we saw what Clemson did with Alabama. That Notre Dame team was legit. That was a legit title contending team with speed and size. They were balanced. They had athletes all over the field. They had NFL players at corner. They had the best linebacker in college football. They had NFL guys along the defensive line. They had 3 first-round draft picks and a second-round draft pick along the offensive line, an NFL guy at tight end, a second-round draft pick at quarterback, the most explosive wide receiver in college football, a third-round draft pick at running back, who was not even their fastest running back. They had CJ Prosise, Josh Adams, and Dexter Williams on that team after Torian Folston got hurt. So I look at it and say, man, that team could have been really good if they had a better defensive coordinator and a real strength program. So I think that set Notre Dame back big time. Even though they were good the several years after, imagine if Notre Dame would have made a title game run and lost to Bama the way that Clemson did. The perception of Notre Dame would be so different. And if they could have won that game, and I think they could have beat Bama that year, man, Ryan, it completely changes the narrative of who Notre Dame is right now. And it was all because of his unwillingness. And it was all because he hired Van Gorder, which I didn't like, and couldn't see the writing on the wall. I mean, the 2014 defense was one of the worst defenses. Like the 2007 team that sucked actually had a pretty solid defense. They were just god-awful on offense, Ryan. They couldn't score. Yeah. But their defense wasn't terrible that year. but man, phew, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Man. It's really crazy. Another one that came to my mind, Brian, was Clay Helton. I think was a massive mistake there, man. Because they wasted. I think they wasted a couple of really talented football teams during that time, man. Really talented teams.
That 16 team should have been way better at the beginning, because by the end of the year they were really good, and that 17 team was disappointing as well. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Let's get to some more here, Ryan. We're going to kind of skip through some of these because we do got to wrap up here very soon. Let's get to here's one from Tom Connor, Ryan.
So what's your starting wide receiver group?
My ideal is Tobias Merriweather, Deion Colsey, and Jaden Thomas. With Lorenzo moving all over and Caleb Smith doing, I'm going to have a legit 5-man receiver rotation with that group right there.
Yeah.
And if somebody doesn't play well, hey, Jaden, great house. Get in there. You know what I mean? Like, that's my group right there, Ryan.
No one should be surprised that I'm talking about the trees outside and then Jaden Thomas inside the slot.
Yes.
It's an easy one for me.
Yep, absolutely. Let's get down to so here's I'll read this one real quick. Zaremba asks, Brian, do you collect the press credentials that you get? I do not. I did like my first couple years, but I really don't. My wife has this thing. So when you check your bag, they give you like a little kind of, you get like the wristbands at a club, Ryan, where you like take it off. It's like the white thing and it snaps it, like it like tapes it shut. It's like that really weird cloth thing. Yeah. My wife leaves all those on her computer bag, so she kind of collects those things. But no, I don't view those. Ryan, you got to jump off. You still gonna be able to MC?
Well, yep, I got you, man.
Cool. All right, so we'll rock through these questions here, moving forward. So we'll start back at the top here with Michael Johnson. So Michael says, is it possible that Chris Tyree could have 500 yards rushing and 500 yards receiving? It's possible. Absolutely, it's possible. I don't know that I would predict it, but it's certainly possible. Especially, here's the thing too. Let's say there's like an injury at one of the positions. Let's say, or running backs. Let's say Logan Diggs sprains his ankle and he's out just a couple games. No big deal, not a big injury, just misses a couple games. And Chris has to get a bunch. I mean, he could get 150 to 200 yards in just those 2 games alone, working as a rotation with Audric Estime. So it could happen. Again, I'm not ready to predict it, but it could certainly happen. Because here's the thing about Chris Tyree, he doesn't need the volume. If you're using him correctly, he doesn't need you give him 10 touches a game and he's going to get 100 yards if you do it correctly. He just will. I mean, so I could see that. I could definitely see that. All right. This is from Domer Gris. Says, happy Friday. Last week you mentioned Chris Tyree's brothers are high academic kids. Are they ND caliber athletes too? Are we recruiting them? They're really fast. The problem is they're smaller than Chris is. They're just not really big. And one of them's name is Nick. I love the Tyree family, man. They are good people, and they do it right with how they raise their children. Football matters to them, no question. But they teach their children that there's a lot more to life than just being a great football player. And yes, you can be passionate about football and work hard at football and have a desire to be great at football, but don't limit yourself to just that. I love that. I wish more parents were like them, where, hey, there's nothing wrong with you wanting to be a professional athlete. Not a dang thing wrong, and work at it. But just because you want to be a great athlete doesn't mean you can't take these other aspects of your life just as serious. I think it's great parenting, and I wish more parents were like that. They're just not quite they're not like Power 5 level kids, because they're just not very big. I think they're both, last I checked, they're both smaller than Chris, and they're not as thick as Chris is. They're thinner than Chris. But yeah, they're fast kids. They're fast kids. All right, how's Matt Salerno look so far? Guys, they've had one practice. He looked exactly like he did last year. So look, in the right role, Matt Salerno can help you in certain things. There's no doubt. It's just you don't want him to be a really much of a primary rotation guy. Josh Buffo, the motivational business banker, says, which decommitter player that left the program would you rather Notre Dame have this year, Justin Rhett or Brandon Hillman, and why? Thank you for all you do. Well, you are welcome, and thank you for the compliment. It'd be Brandon Hillman, clearly. I was never a huge Justin Rhett fan. He was a good player, but I just never saw a guy that was like he was not really a natural football player. He wasn't as physical as you'd expect him to be at his size, and he didn't really continue to progress. I think Brandon Hillman had a much higher ceiling, so I'd go with Brandon Hillman on that one. This JWick13 asks, does your expectations for Notre Dame's receivers change depending on who starts a quarterback? For example, Do you think one quarterback will hone in on one guy versus spreading the ball out more? No, I think we saw in the bowl game last year that Tyler Buchner, when he's comfortable, is going to spread the ball around. I mean, that's the one thing I loved about that bowl game last year. I'm going to pull up the numbers, but I mean, he hits the running back for a 75-yard touchdown. He hits, you had 6 guys catch passes. Your running backs had 7 catches. Lindsey had 4. Jaden Thomas had 5. Mitchell Evans had 3. Chris Tyree had 4. He threw balls to Tobias Merriweather. He was off target, and then Tobias got hurt. He threw balls to Deion Colsey. He attempted to spread the ball around just fine in the game last year. So I don't think that's going to be an issue with either one of those guys. So do my expectations for the receivers change depending on who starts quarterback? Only from the number standpoint. I don't think Notre Dame would throw for as many yards with Tyler Buchner at quarterback simply because he's going to run more. And so you look at that bowl game, for example, Tyler throws for 273 yards. That's a pretty good day's work, right? I mean, 273 yards a game over the course of a 13-game season is going to get you to 3,500 yards. I think if Sam Hartman's your quarterback, you can get closer to 38, 3,900 perhaps. So about a 300-yard difference. I think Tyler will actually use the backs and tight ends, maybe especially the backs a little bit more, because of not so much that Sam won't throw to them, but Tyler's run throw stuff. You're going to want to use the backs more to keep teams honest with a guy like Tyler, so you don't key on his legs. It would look different. And so that's why I would say it would be different with Tyler. But it's not better or worse. It's just maybe the number's not quite as good, but they're still going to be very good no matter who starts a quarterback. And Josh Buffo, the motivational business maker, said, did you see the interview with Jenkins and Jack on the Today Show? How do you feel about it? Good or nothing? Good, bad, or nothing? I'm still – look, I've had a lot of people ask me about this, and I'm still formulating my opinion on this. I don't want to speak emotionally on it. There's some things that I've read and that I've seen them say that I agree with, and there's some things that they've said that really bother me. And since I have a natural dislike for both, I feel like if I commented now, it would be more. It would very much come across as my feelings towards them, and I want to kind of dive into it more. And so I'll talk about it on the message board this week, and I may write an article on it in response, and then maybe respond to it maybe in the next show that we have more about it. Because I think there's some good things they said that I like. There were some things that they said that I didn't like in the article. From what I've read, I didn't see them on the Today Show, but I'll go back and watch it before I make my article. I understand what they're trying to do. I just need to read more into it to give a fair response to it. The good things I like and the things I didn't like. Keith Wagon says, Emil Wagner and Ronnie Stanley comp. I've seen a lot of people making this comparison, and they're trying to say, well, Emil's weight's going to be fine because look, Ronnie had weight, was a smaller guy. Ronnie was 280 pounds when he arrived over 280 pounds when he arrived in Notre Dame. Emil's in his second year at Notre Dame, and he's still not, going into his second season, he's still not 280 pounds. So that regard, I don't accept. Ronnie was 320-pound plus guy. Emil's never going to get that big. But there are some similar things to them. I don't really see a lot of similarities between the two other than length. Ronnie was really long, and Ryan, if you have a different opinion and you want to, if you want to kind of text me your thoughts on that, that's fine, because Ryan's daughter's home, so he's bringing the questions up, but he can't be on the show. It kind of makes it hard with a cute little 1-year-old with a lot of energy. But I think Emil is more powerful than Ronnie was in high school. In high school, I think Emil is more explosive athletically than Ronnie was coming out of high school. I think Emil is every bit as long as Ronnie was coming out of high school. The difference is Ronnie was a lot bigger than Emil was, and that to me is the difference. And Ronnie to me was a little bit more of a natural pass blocker. Emil has all the athletic tools to be a really good pass blocker. He didn't do it a lot in high school, but as a run blocker, he's much further along than what Ronnie was because he's more powerful than what Ronnie was. Just the size, man. It's the body weight. Look, guys, that's the only thing that I think keeps Emil Wagner from being a really good player is the size. That's it. All the other tools are there. I just don't know if he has that ability. Again, he's a ripped up kid. Just not an offensive line frame. He's kind of caught in that I'll say this. If Emil Wagner was the size he is now in the 1990s, he is a star, especially in the 1980s, because you could be 265, 275 pounds and be a great college player. Just can't really do that anymore. I mean, Notre Dame had a guy in the 90s, Rick Kaczynski, was a good football player, and he was like 257 pounds. You can't be that now. You have to be bigger because the other guys that you're going against are bigger. That's a primary reason for it. We have a super chat from Alejandro Coronel, and he says, you guys have done a great job with coverage the last few months. Thank you for that. Look forward to your analysis in the summer and for the season. I wasn't done reading that last one, man. But Alejandro, I appreciate that. Appreciate that very much. Appreciate that very much. We have a super chat from Byron. He has this super sticker here, but then he also has a question about the red zone defense that I'll answer as part of that. It says, was our red zone defense so bad because our linebackers didn't read and react as well as they should? Why exactly were we so bad in that area? Look, the reality is, Byron, when you're that bad, there's not one reason for it. There's not. Like there was schematic issues, linebacker issues. Ryan had mentioned a good point the other day when we were talking about this on a previous show is they were small. They weren't real big defense, and that doesn't hurt you as much in most situations. Being the goal line and teams are just putting a bunch of big guys out there, and they've only got to move you a yard. It's a little tougher, and even then they'd force a lot of teams to get to fourth down. I remember Syracuse had a situation like that where I think they had like first and goal inside the 5, and Notre Dame got them all the way to fourth down. And I think they scored on fourth down. They did that to North Carolina twice. Got him into fourth down, and I think Carolina converted the both of them. I think once was the Jack Kaiser time they beat him was fourth down. May have not been, but the early pass where Josh Downs caught that little quick wide fade in the end zone, that was fourth down. And they did a good job with that. They just couldn't finish. And scheme stuff, like there was a touchdown they gave up against Syracuse, and I remember Ryan and I were like, what the heck were they doing? Because we were sitting there watching it, and they're at like the 15-yard line. They got Benjamin Morrison playing off and outside of a Rondé Gadsden Jr. This is the easiest slant touchdown you're ever going to see. Like, what the heck were they doing? Like, you put that kid in a position to fail. That wasn't on Benjamin Morrison. That was on the coaches. And they owned it after the game, in fairness. They said that was on us, and I appreciated that. But it's just a lot of stuff like that, guys. And then, again, in the red zone, it's very unnecessarily complex and just blitzing when they didn't need to blitz. It was a lot of different. And then in some areas, the lack of length would hurt them. In some areas, it was a lot of different things. But I'm definitely not putting that just on linebackers. Sean Higgins with a super chat. Thank you very much, Sean. Do you feel like the negative fan sentiment we've felt in recent months is shared by parts of the program? I think so. Yeah. I think the unwillingness by Notre Dame we're going to have a show on this. I just have made the decision that I want to wait till after spring because I don't want to have a real negative show that takes away from what the players are trying to do. But I absolutely have heard from a lot of sources that it is obvious because a lot of these kids have friends at Georgia and Ohio State and Michigan and Alabama and Clemson, and they hear and see, and they took visits to these schools, and they're like, hold on now, Notre Dame's got all this money. These kids that I'm going to class with are paying like $70,000 per kid. Like you've got this, $1 billion endowment, which again, I know that doesn't go to football stuff, but the point is you can raise tons of money if you needed to. And we've got this and we've got that and this isn't working and we're not getting this. And, it's just a lot of stuff like that where you're just like, man, like, why are they're like pinching pennies unnecessarily. They won't offer coaches pay raises until someone else comes after them, where Ohio State's just throwing, contracts of the coaches they want to keep to make it to where teams can't afford to come get them, even if they wanted them. There's been assistant coaches at Ohio State that schools have reached out to in recent years. And they say, what are you making at Ohio State? And the guy will say, and it's like, yep, okay, good luck to you. Because, they can't afford that. Some schools just can't afford that. There's no excuse not for – look, here's the deal. I'll say it for the millionth time, and we'll dive into it more in the offseason. I fully support Notre Dame's pushback against NIL the way it's being used. It should not be used as an enticement for recruiting. I believe that with every ounce of my being. It should be something that is earned through legitimate name, image, and likeness, which means not all players are going to be the same. I am for, not to the degree that some people are, but there are certain things that I believe should be part of rev share. Not everything, because schools still need to pay the bills, but there should be things that, hey, look, I've said this a million times. Jersey sales should flat out be a rev share because You're not buying that jersey just because it's a Notre Dame guy. You're buying that jersey because, oh man, I love Ian Book, or I love Sam Hartman, or I love, Jalen Smith, or I love Manti, or whatever the case may be. You see guys walking around campus with a number 5 jersey, not because they just like the jersey, but it's Manti's my guy, or Jalen's my guy, or whatever. That's the reality of it. And say, well, the number 3 is, yeah, but it's Joe Montana, it's Rick Meyer, it's those guys over the years, Arnez Battle, that made that jersey famous. That should flat out be a rev share that you give with your players. And I'd say all of them. I've said this before. You should charge jerseys, because you still sell jerseys expensively. And I'd say this too: if you announced that all your jersey sales, that you would share a percentage of those with your players, and I don't think Notre Dame can do this. I'm saying this is what the NCAA should allow. Hey, we're going to sell our jerseys this year at $150 a pop. You can buy them online. You can buy them in store. And 40%, 50%, whatever, 30%, whatever the cut is, and it should be more than 10, which is an original number. But like say 40% of that number is we're going to take that and we're going to disperse it to our football players. You'd have people buying jerseys just to be able to support the players in that regard. Flat out would. I guarantee a bunch of you in this chat would do that. There's things like that I think they should be able to do. And that's what I want to see, is more stuff like that should be rev shares. So there should be things that they're doing. And I support Notre Dame's pushback against some of those things. But there's other things that they're refused to embrace that I think are silly and petty and just because they're cheap. And there's no excuse, none, to not have a top 5 highest paid coaching staff in America. None. That should never be paying for a coach should never be a problem. And you need a great coaching staff to win. And so the unwillingness to pay more for assistant coaches, and Brian Kelly did a lot to get more and more for assistants, and Charlie Weiss did as well, but it's still not even close where it needs to be. And so things like that, making sure that your facilities are top notch. Now, again, there's some stuff that's just outlandishly unnecessary, but there's a lot of stuff that they need that the school should absolutely be paying more for and be willing to pay for. Things like that, having the best nutrition program in the country should absolutely be in Notre Dame's. Why are you not looking to set those trends? Anything, and I've said this before, anything that is player related, Notre Dame should flat out be setting the bar for everyone else. Our mental health, the things we do for our players from a mental health standpoint. Because here's the deal. Notre Dame sets the standard for college football for what your academic support staff should be, flat out. And I love Notre Dame for that. Other coaches will tell you, man, like Notre Dame coaches don't have to do a thing when it comes to academics. This academic support at Notre Dame, I know coaches that used to be at Notre Dame that have been at other places, and they'll tell you this, man, the academic support there is outstanding. They do a phenomenal job there. Then you'll get into but then you get into the other things. Why isn't it that way for your nutrition program? Why isn't it that way for your mental health situation? Why isn't it that way for, helping, setting up a program? And part of this is a little tricky with the NIL, but once rules get passed where your school is allowed to work with these kids, making sure that they're on top of knowing what's going on with NIL, know your opportunities, know your worth, make sure you're hiring people. This guy's trying to get you to sign on for 20%. No way, buddy. Let me help you with this contract negotiation for this deal. We have people that know how to do this. They'll represent you to make sure that you're getting a cut. Like the school should be doing that. So these kids don't need NIL agents, that they got to pay 10, 15, 20% to, or, those NIL agents work with the school and they get a smaller cut, kind of like NFL agents. Ryan's talked about this. Things where we're protecting the kids and helping the kids in those regards. When that day comes, Notre Dame should have the best in the country. They should have the best training staff, the best strength and conditioning staff. They should have a top 5 highest paid coaching staff. There's no excuse not to. That's the kind of stuff that Notre Dame should never take a backseat to anyone for. You don't want to do this insane facilities that other people do. I'm okay with that. But the Googs shouldn't be outdated. You should never let yourself be outdated. But you don't need some of the extravagant things other people do. That's fine. But the other stuff that they're unwilling to be the trendsetters on, that stuff's unnecessary. There's no excuse for that. And that's the stuff that I want to see Notre Dame do a better job of. And I think that is something that's a sentiment shared by a lot of people as part of the football program that I've talked to over the years. I think that's where you can and need to get a lot better. in my opinion. No question about it. Josh also said, asked this question yesterday, but want your response. Who is the swaggiest Notre Dame player in your ND viewing history? Probably Ricky Waters. Probably Ricky Waters and Jalen Smith are probably the two that immediately pop out in my head. Are probably my two. Next is Michael Johnson says, has Notre Dame ever had a Heisman, Biletnikoff, and Doak Award winner in a single season? I'm pretty sure that's a no, because I believe that Notre Dame has only had one Biletnikoff Award winner ever, and that is Golden Tate. So let me just pull this up here real quick. The Biletnikoff Award. Let me real quick and look that up. Yeah, Golden Tate is Notre Dame's only goal. It's the only year they've ever had a Biletnikoff Award winner. That was 2009, and they clearly didn't have a Doak Walker Award winner or a Heisman Trophy winner those seasons. And I don't know if Notre Dame has ever had a Doak Award. And they've never had a guy win the Doak Walker Award. So, and again, some of these are new. Like the Doak Walker Award started in 1990, and the Biletnikoff Award started in 1994. So those are relatively new awards. All right. Archer says, Archer 452, which one can take a bigger jump for quarterback given the right training development, arm strength, or accuracy? Honestly, Archer, it depends on the kid. For Tyler Buckner, it's arm accuracy. For a guy like Kenny Minchey, it's arm strength, because Kenny Minchey can't get a whole lot better with accuracy. Given me all things being equal, I think the thing that can have the biggest jump to me is arm strength. I think that accuracy is not something you can always teach. What I would kind of change this a little bit is, if you're accurate, you're accurate. If you have the ability to be accurate, I can enhance it and teach you more about a word that I like to use more than accuracy is ball placement. Because I think ball placement's different than accuracy. Accuracy kind of speaks to just an overall percentage. To me, if you're an accurate quarterback, or if you have the talent to be an accurate quarterback, it doesn't necessarily mean you are accurate because you don't have an understanding of ball placement. I can put the ball wherever I want to put it. I just don't know that I'm supposed to put it here. So a slant route, I can put the ball wherever I want to put the ball. But if you ask most kids, they're going to throw slants and hit you right in front and hit you in stride and so good. No, what if the corner's coming over top? What if the corner's coming from behind? There's times where that slant needs to be right on a guy's near hip. It's where the ball needs to go, depending on where the DB is. But if the DB's playing trail and I throw behind, he's getting his hand around, maybe even step in front and picking it off. I got to get it more out in front. There's times when this ball needs to be high. There was a throw today that I saw Sam Hartman make where it's like they're throwing back lines, and that ball's thrown really high. The guy to go jump up and get it. But that's exactly where that ball needed to be when you're running a back line throw, because you want to throw it over top of the defense and let a guy go up. Brady Quinn, you should make a killing on that with Mo Stovall and Jeff Samardzija. He slowed that ball like 10, 12 feet and let those guys go up and get it where only they can go get it. That's exactly what that's ball placement. That's a part of accuracy, but it's the more detailed part of it. I think that can be enhanced a lot. But if a guy's in, like, for example, Kyle Bowler was never going to be an accurate quarterback, ever. He didn't have the ability to do it. He didn't have the skill to do it. I don't care how much he had. Jeff Tedford was his quarterback's coach. If Jeff Tedford can't make you better than a 50% completion percentage, nobody is. So I think arm strength would be that. Guys who have the ability to be accurate can be enhanced, but I think it's hard to take a guy who's just not accurate and turn him into a really accurate passer. I think that's hard to do. That's a lot harder to do. It's about enhancing things that are already there. Kerry Van Orman says, is Notre Dame ever going to bring back the coaches clinic? This was a great way to practice and listen to the coaches. I don't know. I'm shocked that they don't have it back yet. I mean, you're in year 2 of Marcus Freeman. The COVID stuff's a thing of the past. I don't have a clue. I need to look into that and figure out why they're not doing that this year. It is a little strange. It's going to skip that next one, Ryan. Let's go to the next one. I want to kind of work through some of these here real quick. Let's go to Mike Reddy. It says, how concerning is it that the best athletes, Patelho, Burnham, Kaiser, Maris, Snead, Ramon, are better situated attacking, blitzing, and not reading and reacting or playing in space? Well, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Number one, when you're young and you're really athletic, you're going to be better at coming downhill. A lot of the guys you just mentioned are young. Ramon is pretty inexperienced at that position. Burnham was a freshman last year, learning a new position. Botelho had just been moved back from playing Rover. Jalen Sneed was a freshman last year. When you're young, you're going to not be as good in space because there's a lot more thinking involved. So you just attack, see ball, get ball, and your athleticism takes over. Maris just doesn't show a feel for the game. I put him completely different. And again, Jack Kaiser is his issue is more length. There's nothing you can do about that. I don't care. You have the best coaching in the world. You can be the smartest player in the world. When you're barely 6 feet tall with short arms and you're guarding a 6'5" tight end with long arms, I don't care how smart you are or how well coached you are. You're going to lose that battle if the quarterback has any feel for ball placement. So it's just different for every kid, honestly. And, you know, for Botelho, he showed in 2021 he can play in space, but why? Why put him in space? He has a really good knack for getting to the quarterback. So why do it? I mean, I just don't understand the point of doing that. So it's different for every kid. It's different for every kid. Well, this is an interesting one from Lenny Smith. Memphis guard Jamira Shoots sucker punched Bowling Green's Alyssa Brett in the face during handshakes following Bowling Green's win. And what do you think should happen to her? So I saw the hit, and it was kind of during the handshake. She has been, I think they've put out, she's been charged, I think is what I saw from the Bowling Green Bowling Green police, charged her with assault. That's a really interesting situation. And here's my thoughts on it. There's a lot of things that happen during a game that I think are just part of competition, part of the game, and kind of part of with what this girl did. When you watch it, she sought out the other girl in the handshake. So she's the first girl in the handshake. She stops, looks at that girl, starts saying something. I don't know what was said by either side, and then sucker punches her after the game. For me, I mean, I don't know if I'm comfortable saying someone should be charged with assault, but it's like, if you walked up to somebody like that in the street and did that to them in the street, that's assault, right? That's a charge. I'm pressing charges against you. Should it be different on the court after a game? It's a good question. I think that's a gray area. You know, there's not a lot the school can do because her career's over. From what I read, she's, you know, this is the last game of her career. So, that's a tough one, guys. That's really a tough one for me, because if somebody just walked up and did that to me in the street, first of all, I'm probably hitting you back a lot. And if I don't, like, if my wife's there and she's able to, it's like, no, or my friends are there and they stop me, you're going to get arrested. If you just walk up to me and punch me in the face, and I didn't instigate that fight, and I'm sorry, you get hit with an elbow in a game, you handle that in the game when you're able to. You don't wait till after the game and do what they did. And yeah, I don't like that. But should she be charged with assault? Well, that's a tough one. That's a tough one, because now you're talking about putting something on somebody's record for that. That's a tough one. I'm not sure how I feel about that one, to be honest with you. I'm not sure how I feel about that one. Ben Tarnowski says, if either of you were the OC, would you consider doing some Debo Samuel type stuff with Lorenzo Styles? If so, what would it look like? The problem is it's the same thing with Chris Tyree. It's not a direct correlation for talent. Like, Lorenzo can do some stuff, but Lorenzo's not a super. Neither of those guys are super shifty guys. Debo's has some shiftiness, and Debo's built he's built strong. I just don't think either one of those guys are direct comparisons to Debo in skill set. Are there things I would do with Lorenzo, getting him the ball? And yes, I've said this. I mean, he played running back at times in high school. He ran a jet sweep for like 50 some yards against Virginia in 2021. Yeah, there's some stuff I would do. Would I do it like Debo did with the Niners? I don't know if I'd go that far. I think Chris Tyree can do some things there, but then with him, you're not going to have him doing some of the pass game stuff that Debo did. So there's not a perfect comparison to Debo, but in regard to getting them the ball in a lot of different ways, yes, absolutely. Both of them need to get the ball in a lot of different ways. There's no question about it. No question about it. V-Dub at 804. Can Jeremiah Love see the field this year? Kenny, yes, absolutely. Jeremiah Love is athletic. He's explosive. He became a much more comfortable football player this year, where as a junior was kind of just a really good athlete trying to learn the game. He looked a lot more comfortable this year, looked a lot more natural, I should say, is probably a better way of saying it than comfortable. Looked a lot more natural as a football player this past season, which to me is a great sign and something that you want to see. Now, would I go out and say, yes, he's definitely going to play? It's going to be tough because Notre Dame is loaded at those two positions, which I think speaks volumes about how good Notre Dame is at running back and receiver, that I'm not sure that a kid that I graded as a top 50 overall recruit could have a tough time seeing the field this year. I do think that's where, I've said it before, I would have him returning kicks this year and give him a chance to return punts. If he shows any knack for those two things, I would let him do that for sure. Let him get some touches because he needs to play. He's not a redshirt guy, and you want to keep him happy. So I would find a way to get him in there. And then if I'm blowing a team out, him and Jared Darren Price are getting in the game early in the second half, because I don't care as much about Audric and Logan Diggs' overall numbers. I care about their yards per carry being high and about them being fresh in November and into the postseason. If that means in a couple blowout games I don't get him as many touches, fine. I don't care. Get your work in the beforehand. So that's what I'd like to see in a way to get him the ball. Rob Didoff, it's a basketball question. Let's say Coach Shrewsbury turns around Irish hoops sooner than expected. Let's even say win a national title by year 3. Whoa. Do you think an NBA team tries to hire him or leaves for the NBA? I have no idea. I would be shocked. Like, this is just my opinion. I can't give, this is not an expert analysis. I don't know that. I'm not a basketball guy, but just looking at it, I mean, John Beilein got hired because, for his career in the NBA, he had no NBA experience at all. And he did some really good things with Michigan and got hired in the NBA. And I look at some of the other guys, Billy Donovan, Brad Stevens, they got hired in the NBA. And, Brad Stevens did that because he took Butler up, to back-to-back national title games. If Micah Shrewsbury was able to win a championship at the University of Notre Dame, I don't care what year it was, year 3 or year 10, a program that's I don't think it's ever won a national championship in basketball. I don't believe Notre Dame basketball I'm going to look this up here real quick. I don't believe Notre Dame men's basketball has ever won a national championship. I'm looking at it now. Let's see here. Pre-tournament Helms champions, 1927 and 1936. But since the NCAA tournament, Notre Dame has made the Final Four once. They've only made the Elite Eight 7 times. And since I was born in 78, they made it in 78, 79, and then 15 and 16, 4 times. That's it. They made it in the 50s 3 times. This is not a program with that kind of basketball history. You've got all the disadvantages working against you, NIL, one and dones. You can't sell the academic piece like the football team can, because most great players are going to be there. If he was somehow able to win a title, which is doable in today's era, at Notre Dame, with 6 years as an assistant coach with the Celtics on his resume, I'd be shocked if an NBA team didn't try to hire him. Would he leave for the NBA? I have no idea. I don't know Micah Shrewsbury at all. I don't know if he has any interest in being an NBA head coach. But I'd be shocked if teams didn't try. Shocked. I really would. Just Your Ordinary Joe. Is football officiating considered a noble profession? Know any well? What sets the good ones apart? I don't know any of them very well. Is it a noble profession? I think anything that requires the ability to be good at it, you have to work at it. So you're not just showing up at a job and just punching buttons. And there's nothing against that, but it's, let's be honest, there's certain jobs like it doesn't take a lot of skill or work to do. You just show up and do your job and don't screw up. To be a good official, you have to work at it. You have to practice. You have to take pride in it. It's like, I've said this, my dad was an umpire when I was growing up in baseball. And he took a lot of pride in it. He would shine his shoes before every game. He would always make sure his shirts were ironed, and my mom would iron his shirts. And he looked like, this guy looks serious about it. And then he'd show up, and the guy working the game with him is like, the dude's got a faded shirt. He's got like a cigarettes pack rolled up in his sleeve. His stuff's wrinkled. His shoes look disgusting. Like you tell he hasn't cleaned them since the last time he did a game, and just looks sloppy. You're like, that guy's just taking a paycheck. He just likes baseball. He's taking a paycheck. Like my dad put a lot of pride in being good at what he was doing. He had respect for the craft. And so to be good at and as a football official, you have to work at it. And so to me, that makes it kind of a noble profession. And what sets the good ones apart, I think you have to have good instincts, eye for the game and all that, but it's work. I want to be good at it. And you have to be able to take ego out of it. If you are someone with a big ego, and we see this in NBA is worse than NBA and Major League Baseball are way worse than the NFL. You get these guys that they think it's about them. Angel Hernandez, for example, worst of Major League umpire I've ever seen in my life, but also one of the most rabbit-eared umpires you're ever going to see. Just ultra sensitive. Joe West was this way too, but at least he was better official than Angel Hernandez was. It's like, Joe, no one's here to see you. NBA had it that way. Dude, no one's here to see you, Joey Crawford. Nobody. So stop making it about you. And so football's different, but you got to take your ego out of it and care about, I'm going to do this right. You do that, I think it's a noble profession, and to me would be something that I have a lot of respect for people to do that, because you got to take a lot of crap to be an official, a lot of crap. If you do it well and you put your ego aside, I got respect for you. I really do. All right, going from Archer 452. I saw a Life magazine that had Aerosmith on the cover and called them America's greatest rock band. Who is the greatest American rock band? I don't even know what would be considered. I'm going to type this in. What would be considered great or rock, I guess. I don't really know. I don't really listen to that kind of music, to be completely honest with you. I mean, I'm looking at this list here. Beach Boys. I mean, are they a rock band? Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Van Halen. That was a pretty good one. Creedence Clearwater Revival. Aerosmith is 5. The Doors. I don't know about the Doors. Talking Heads. Never even heard of them. REM. They're not American. Eagles. Are they American, or are they from somewhere? Are they from? I know my dad and my uncle probably might say the Eagles. Yeah, I don't even know most of these bands, to be honest with you. Like, would people consider what's that group, Metallica, a rock band, or is it heavy metals? I don't have a clue, guys. I honestly don't know. That's not my type of music, so I don't have an opinion on that. I don't mind talking about it. I mean, people ask me all the time, what's your favorite rappers? And that's more the type of music I'm more familiar with it, though. I mean, Aerosmith's popular. I don't know if they've got some good songs, some good party songs. I don't know if I could say who the greatest rock band is. I have to ask my dad that one. He might have a better answer for me. So, I mean, like, what groups get clumped into rock? I guess that would be my thing. So, don't have an answer for you, man. I'm sorry, Archer. I apologize. Matt Sakalowski, who's now an uncle, by the way, I believe. But barring injury, who would you possibly look to redshirt in 23? So from the 23 class, I would like to redshirt Kenny Minchie. I would like to redshirt, if possible, Cooper Flanagan, but I don't know if that's possible. I'd like to redshirt all my offensive linemen other than Charles Jagasaw. I'd like to redshirt all my defensive linemen. I'd like to redshirt Jaden Osbury if possible, because I want to get a year of physical development from him. And if possible, I'd like to redshirt the 2 safeties. I don't know if that's going to be possible, but I'd like to. I think and I don't normally say that about skill players, but I think Adon Schuler and Ben Minich could both be 5-year guys. And I don't often say that, but those are guys that I'd ideally like to. I don't care to redshirt any of the receivers. Maybe Rico. Rico might be a 5-year guy. Maybe Caleb Smith. Jaden Greathouse isn't a 5-year guy. Braylon James isn't a 5-year guy. Jeremiah Love's not a 5-year guy. Drake Bowen's probably not a 5-year guy, but if he was willing to do it, Preston Zinner, I'd want to redshirt Preston Zinner as well. There's a lot of 23 guys I'd like to redshirt if I can. I have zero interest in redshirting the corners. None. Zero interest in recruiting or redshirting Braylon James or Jaden Greathouse or Jeremiah Love. None. Zero interest in redshirting Charles Jagasaw. None. So if I can find a way to play him, I will. Everybody else, if I could redshirt them, that'd be great. If they're willing, if they're okay with it, and understanding of why, it's great. It's great. Monoler of the weight changes, which one concerns you and which do you find encouraging? Well, I was really happy to see that Emil Wagner put on 11 pounds. That made me happy. Like, okay, good. He's already almost to 2. Because what I said before, we got the official weights. I said, listen, if he can just have a nice jump this year and put him in position to be 285, 290 the next year, I'm happy. Well, if we're to believe that weight that we saw from him, he's up to 279. That's great. I'm very happy about that. So that was very encouraging to see. So if he can kind of keep that, well, that's great. And then you kind of, if you can make a similar jump a year from now, you're talking about Emil coming into 290. I mean, I didn't want him to be 290 in year one. I would be worried about him getting too much weight too fast. You redshirted him last year. Maybe you can play him in some backup roles this year where, if his weight's not a problem, he can still learn. That was great. I was very happy to see Tyson Ford put on a lot of weight as long as it's good. Here's the thing. It's got to be good weight, though. Holden Stace, I was fired up to see him up to 242, put 16 pounds on. Josh Burnham put 14 pounds on. That was good. Andrew Kristofic put 10 pounds on. I hope that's good. Jason Onye put on 9 pounds, which I hope is good. Tobias put on a good 7 pounds. I mean, so there's guys like that I was very happy to see. Nana putting on 10 pounds to get up to 260. That has me a little bit concerned, a little bit nervous. Rocco put on 10 pounds to get up 325. Has me a little bit concerned, to be honest with you. I didn't love that. Aiden Gobira losing weight or not gaining weight, that concerned me. And I think Blake Fisher lost a little bit too much weight. Him getting all the way down to 310. Again, it's the spring. It's different. You get all the baby fat off and then work on getting the next 5-10 pounds back on in muscle. Cool. That's cool. So I'm not panicked about it yet, but I hope Blake gets back up to 315, 320 at least by the time the season starts would be my ideal. Just get maybe a little better weight, a little reshaped weight. That's fine. That one concerned me a little bit, to be honest with you. And then Michael Carmody not gaining any weight, at least on the roster, was problematic for me. It's very concerning. I just don't think you can be a starter in college football at a place like Notre Dame at 280 pounds. Just don't think you can. From Lou Holtz, Thunder and Bolts. Realistically, when can you expect to see Jadarian Price this year? Any chance he can work himself into the 1-2 rotation? It's going to be hard for him to do that. And you got 2 good running backs. He had a chance to beat those guys out last year, but those guys now have experience. They've proven to be effective. And he missed a year. He's going to be a little rusty. It's going to be hard to crack the 1-2 rotation this year. I just want to see him healthy enough to play. And I think he will. I think he'll be healthy enough to play this year. He'd be another guy. Said if he's healthy, my 2 kick returners deep are Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love. That's who they are. I'd give him a chance to do that. Him and Jeremiah, I said, would be getting into blowouts early, third quarter early, getting them some touches. I would like to see all that. But yeah, I think he'll have a chance to play this year. I don't know if it'll be like game 1 or if he'll need a little bit more time. Achilles are a little bit more tricky. They require a little more time. But he got hurt in like July. So by the time the first game, it'll be over a year since his surgery. So he should be able to play this year. I'd be shocked. The only way he won't is if he has a setback, in my opinion. That one from Brandon Plesner. We would like more athletic. Oh, actually, we pulled this up earlier. We answered that one earlier. I just forgot to start. Wade Garrett said, "What would you need to see this year to let you know that Marcus Freeman is the right guy as the head coach? What would need to happen to give you some concern?" Well, just improvement, right? So a lot of people say, "Well, I'm a little nervous. Coach Freeman didn't fire Al Washington, Al Golden after 1 year." Okay, that's one way to go with it. I understand that sentiment. I'm not on board with it necessarily. Here's another sentiment. What if he does what he needs to do to get more out of them? I don't necessarily want to fire Al Golden. I've said this before. I think Al Golden's a really smart coach, and if he works at it, could be a really good recruiter. So you sit down with him and say, "Hey, look, here's what we liked from year 1. Here's what I didn't like. I need you to be more involved in recruiting. You don't have to be the primary linebacker guy. Chad can help you with that. So-and-so can help you with that. Max Bullock can help you with that. Whatever. I can help you with that. But I need you to be more involved. I need you to really be more involved with our top prospects. I need you to do more there." Cool. Got it. If he doesn't want to do it, then you find someone else. But I don't think Al Golden would be resistant to that. But you got to say, I need you to do it. I'm going to hold you accountable for it. Hey, listen, I love what you're doing defensively, schematically. I think you're a great, smart coach. But here's two things I need you to scale things back a little bit because we got to get these kids playing faster. There was way too much thinking last year. And it can't just be, well, you're going to be better this year because you're older, because then you're going to be an up and down roller coaster defense. Because every year that you're young, you're going to struggle. And every year that you're old, you're going to be better. I can't have that. You have a baseline here. And then if you happen to have a veteran unit that you can get a little bit more out of, you're fine. But the foundation's been established. I need to scale that back a little bit. It's not about you. It's not about how smart you are. It's about how smart they are. And then we'll find that balance, right? But I need you to do that more because I think he's got a lot of potential. I'd much rather see Marcus Freeman do that than to just fire the guy because I think he's a good coach. Brian Van Gorder was who he was. He was not a good coach. He should have been gone after 2014. Al Golden had a much better. I mean, he had a top 30 defense last year, guys. I mean, he wasn't bad, just wasn't as good as it needed to be. And there are things he needs to do to correct it. I'd learn a lot more about Marcus Freeman and feel a lot more confident with him if he could recognize the issues and fix them without having to fire people all the time. Help coach your coaches. That's the job of a head coach, just as much as coaching your players, in my opinion. And if he showed me that, I'd feel great about it. And then, there's some other things I'd like to see him do, but I don't think he feels after 9-4, maybe he doesn't feel comfortable doing those things. We'll find out if he has a better year, if he feels more comfortable doing that. And what would need to happen to give you some concern? Things don't get fixed. Defense has the same exact problems it did last year. Offense has the same exact problems it had last year. If we don't see this team get better, that tells me he can't fix and then have addressed the things that need to happen. That would be a concern. Things just don't get fixed. That would be what gives me pause about Coach Freeman. Last few here. We got one from Brandon Plesner. If Cole Sullivan committed Notre Dame and Kingston, Viliama, Asa, Peyton Pierce, I forget the Pruitt kid's first name, and then Tylen Singleton were no longer options, what other two would you want to round out the 2024 class? Well, first of all, I don't know why you're just dismissing those guys as options, but if you want to, just for the sake of argument, if that happens, I don't know that I would necessarily take two more linebackers in this class, to be completely honest with you. Some guys on the board that I really like that I wouldn't mind seeing them go after if you had Cole Sullivan in the class. Obviously, keep going after Aaron Childs. He's a really good player. I would say, boy, that's a tough one. Because I don't know if I want Cole Sullivan and Bodie Calhoun in the same class, to be completely honest with you. There's a kid from California named Tuakai, who I like a lot. I would try to flip Garrett Stover. I'd do things like that because you just kind of took – it's Cameron Pruitt. You just kind of took most of my top guys away. Brian Huff from Arkansas or Arizona or Arkansas, I'd try to make a run at. I'd try to keep going after him. Keyshawn Flowers from Maryland, I would make a run at. But, Davis Andrews is a guy that I would look at as maybe a potential safety / rover type of guy. But I'd probably just say we're just going to go two this year and try to load up and fill it up next year is what I'd probably do. If those guys aren't available to me, I don't know if there's two other guys right now that they have a shot at that. If Pierce and Kingston aren't options anymore, then some of these other guys I mentioned probably aren't going to be options either. So that would be a tough deal. It'd be a really tough deal. If you couldn't get Kingston, yeah, it's going to be a tough deal. Tyler Smith, why is the left tackle more important position than the right tackle? For me as a quarterback, it's because it's harder for me to see and avoid a left tackle than a guy coming from the left side than the right side. It's a little easier in shotgun than it is under center, but it's still not easy. Because as a right-handed quarterback, I'm naturally going to turn this way. And my peripheral vision is always going to be less here than here. And so that's something that you look at and say, hey, I need to know that I don't have to worry about back here. I got to trust that guy's going to be there. And so it's more great. If a quarterback has any feel in the pocket, there's greater chance that he's going to get a strip sack or a fumble or a big mistake with someone coming from my behind. Because a great pass rusher is not going to come. So I'm dropped back here. A great pass rusher is not going to be coming from here. He's going to be coming from here behind me. And that's where you have the guy coming from behind. If you get hit in the face and fumble because the guy comes from your front side, then you just don't have any vision. Or you made a fundamental technical mistake where you then couldn't avoid that guy. It's the blindside guy that's more important. And most quarterbacks are right-handed. So the left tackle position is a more quote-unquote important position. He's the guy primarily tasked with protecting your quarterback. Quarterback can see everything else from guard over pretty well. And then if it's up to you to get out of the way. So I think the blindside thing is legitimate. As a quarterback, it's legitimate. It is the position I have the hardest time seeing. The only time I ever got hit that I didn't see it coming was in college. We're playing Wesley, and it was a guy just took a wide rush. I didn't see it because I couldn't see it. He took a wide rush, and he was really fast and just killed my left tackle, who was terrible, and hit me right in the back, and I didn't see it coming. Only blindside hit I ever took in the pocket. Now, there's a couple hits I took in, like scrambling around. Like I'd make a couple guys miss, like kind of cut back, and the guy comes this way and hits me. That's fine. The only other time that I got hit in the back was I was running, and I made a guy juke, and a guy hit me in the back and drove me into the ground face first. That was against Methodist College, I think. But I mean, those are natural parts of it. That happens to all runners. It's one time, and I just didn't see it. And I could see a lot of the others because I was in the shotgun a lot, but it's hard to see. And the NFL, it's a lot different because, I mean, they're faster and they're even better, and they're going to get you a lot quicker. So that's why it's important to me. Last couple, here we go. Brandon says, what are your thoughts on 2024 Arkansas linebacker Brian Huff? Also, does he project a Mike, Will, or both? Honestly, Brandon, that was a question I started for Ryan. I haven't watched Brian Huff yet, to be honest with you. That's Ryan's job. So I don't know what Ryan thinks about him. But so I've heard he's athletic. I heard he's got a long kid, but I just haven't watched him yet, to be honest with you. So that's more of a question for Ryan. I can't believe that we're going to end on a question of something. Oh, no, here we got one more. Okay. Irish Mills 540. Obviously, the biased answer is both, but taking the Notre Dame bias goggles off, what game do you see us having a higher chance of winning, Ohio State or USC? I got to tell you, I really don't like questions like this. I really don't like questions where you assume I have a bias. I don't. And it just kind of frustrates me because I think I already get, if you just ask me, who do you think Notre Dame has a higher chance of winning against, Ohio State or USC? I would have given you my honest answer. I would not have given you a biased answer. I would never give you a biased answer. I always give you my honest answers. So you don't need to preface it with taking my ND bias goggles off. I don't believe that I have ND bias goggles. And if I do have them, I don't know that I have them, so I can't take them off. I'm giving you my honest opinion. Who do they have a higher chance of beating? In my opinion, it's USC. I think the problem here is Ohio State has a much better all-around roster than USC. USC has the more dynamic quarterback. To me, if I can find a way to neutralize the dynamic quarterback like Utah did, like Oregon State did, and like Washington State did, they were able to neutralize the quarterback to a degree, and that gave them a chance to win those games. They didn't have the offense that Notre Dame I expect to have. If I can neutralize one guy and that hurts your team a lot, then I am going to have a better shot at beating you than a team that maybe doesn't have as good of a quarterback, which I don't expect Ohio State to have as good of a quarterback this year. But I think Ohio State's going to have a much better all-around team. And the more balanced team is the one that concerns me. For example, I think Ohio State's going to have a much better defense than USC this year. I think Ohio State's going to have a more balanced offense than USC this year, in my opinion. Now, USC has that's something Lincoln Riley's always done a pretty good job of is finding good balance. But I think Ohio State will still be more balanced on offense this year. I think they're going to be better at receiver. I think they're more talented at running back if they're healthy. I think that they're going to be better on defense if they're healthy. The only place that I think USC may have an advantage, and this is a big if, is offensive line and quarterback. That's it. And so that's why I say USC is the team they have a higher chance of winning, because I just think that Notre Dame's talent matches up a lot better. You have to play really well to beat Ohio State. And USC, you just have to slow down Caleb Williams. You slow him down and you got a pretty good shot at winning because you can score on them a lot easier than you can score on Ohio State, in my opinion. So that's why I would say USC would be my answer on that one. So, yeah, that's a good one. So that's how we're going to end it, everybody. Listen, if you are with us, the rapid fire, some of you have already left for that, but the rapid fire is going on right now, which went live here a little bit ago with Sean and Vince. So you go check that out. And then we are going to be back tomorrow for our post-practice. I think it's going to be at 2 o'clock. We'll probably go around 2 o'clock. Let me just check the practice schedule here real fast and make sure that we have a good set time. So the practice will be done It'll be at 10:30, so we'll get the first 5 periods, so we'll be good to go at 2 o'clock tomorrow. So we'll go live tomorrow, Saturday at 2 o'clock, Brian and I, for our post-practice breakdown of tomorrow's practice. And then after that, of course, we'll be back on Monday. So make sure, folks, you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, sign up for the message board. I'm serious. If you haven't sign up for the message board, you're missing out. You need to sign up and help support. Not only are you supporting Irish Breakdown, you're also part of a great community with great conversation, great discussion. You're definitely going to check that out. So for Ryan, I'm Brian, folks. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you again very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.